Do you know that feeling when a lie jumps out of your mouth before your brain has time to approve it? When the words escape so quickly that you can almost see them floating in the air, impossible to take back. Grace Holloway knew that feeling well. And on that cold December morning in New York, she was about to discover exactly how far a small, desperate lie could take her. But before we get to the chaos that a charming billionaire and an improbable deal would cause in her life, we need to go back a few hours, to the exact moment when everything began to spiral out of control, quietly, delicately, and dangerously embarrassing. Stay with me until the end. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel, because this lie will still lead her down paths she never imagined traveling. The first week of December in Manhattan had a certain magic to it. Grace walked down Fifth Avenue with a cup of hot chocolate held between her gloved hands, watching the city transform into an urban fairy tale setting. Golden lights hung from every lamppost. Store windows competed in holiday creativity. The smell of roasted chestnuts mingled with the fresh pine scent from the tree vendors. She stopped in front of the Saks window display, where an elaborate scene showed the birth of Jesus surrounded by mechanical angels and artificial snow falling in slow motion. A child beside her pressed their hands against the glass, eyes wide with pure enchantment. Grace smiled. This was real Christmas. Not the stressful lines in the stores, not the pressure for perfect gifts or impeccable parties. It was that moment of childlike wonder. It was generosity. It was light amidst the winter. It was a celebration of something greater than ourselves. Her phone vibrated. A message from Elena Martinez, her best friend and co-worker at the Harmony Foundation. Has your secret admirer shown up yet today? Bet you $20 he brings coffee again. Grace rolled her eyes, but she was smiling as she typed back, "If he shows up, you win. But I hope he got the message yesterday." But he hadn't gotten any message. The Harmony Foundation office was in a charming red brick building in the West Village, with tall windows that let natural light flood the open spaces. The foundation coordinated art and music programs for youth in public schools, organized educational concerts, and maintained free workshops on weekends. It was the kind of place where ideals still mattered more than profits, and Grace loved every inch of that environment. She entered, shaking the snow off her shoulders, greeted Marcus at reception, and went up to the second floor where her desk was located. The office was lively that morning, with several people preparing materials for the Christmas concert happening in 2 weeks. Elena was already at the desk next to hers, dark hair tied up in a messy bun, wearing a vibrant red sweater with embroidered reindeer that only she could make look chic. "Good morning, Queen," Elena said without taking her eyes off the computer screen, where she was working on a flyer design. "Your hot chocolate arrived before you, I see." "It's my faithful companion," Grace replied, taking off her coat and hanging it on the chair. She wore a wine-colored knitted sweater over a gray midi skirt, ankle boots, and the delicate bracelet her grandmother had given her years ago. Her light brown hair was pulled back into a low bun with a few loose strands framing her face. Simple, comfortable herself. "It's also more reliable than certain men," Elena mumbled, and Grace knew exactly who she was referring to. As if summoned by the mention, Charles Whitfield appeared at the doorway with 2 cups of coffee in his hand, and that smile he probably thought was charming. Grace felt her stomach clench. "Good morning, Grace." He approached with the confidence of someone who had never heard a definitive no in their life. "I brought your favorite. Cinnamon latte, right?" Grace forced a polite smile, the kind she had perfected after months of dealing with this. "Oh, Charles, thank you. But I've already had coffee. And actually, I prefer hot chocolate, I know," he interrupted, placing the cups on her desk anyway and sitting on the edge as if invited. "But I thought I'd innovate. You need to get out of your comfort zone sometimes." Out of the corner of her eye, Grace saw Elena roll her eyes so dramatically it was impressive Charles didn't feel the energy. He was invading her personal space again, leaning in so that Grace had to subtly lean back in her chair. Charles Whitfield was 36, worked as a partnerships and fundraising coordinator, and was objectively handsome in a conventional way. Perfectly cut blonde hair, a well-fitted suit, a toothpaste commercial smile. The problem wasn't his appearance. It was his systematic refusal to accept disinterest. "So, Grace," he continued, crossing his legs overly casually, "that Italian restaurant I mentioned last week, How about Friday night? I already made a reservation. Very romantic place, candles, excellent wine. Discomfort crept up Grace's spine like a cold wave. Charles, I have plans Friday. Saturday then. He didn't miss a beat. Or Sunday. I'm flexible. I can adjust to your schedule. Grace opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. How many times had she politely declined? 5? 10? She had said she was busy, that she preferred to keep professional relationships at work, that she wasn't interested in dating. But Charles interpreted every no as try again with more insistence. It's just that, well, the words got stuck in her throat, and then they came out. Before she could process it, before the rational part of her brain intervened, the words simply burst out in a pure reflex of self-preservation. I have a boyfriend. Silence. Elena froze, pen suspended in the air, eyes wide and fixed on Grace. Charles blinked once, twice. The smile wavered. Grace felt the blood drain from her face. What had she just done? Boyfriend? Charles repeated slowly, as if testing the weight of the word. The smile returned, but different now, sharper. Funny, Grace, you never mentioned a boyfriend before, not once. And how long have we worked together? 8 months? It's recent, Grace heard her own voice say, and mentally began making a list of all the reasons why she was heading straight for hell. Charles crossed his arms, tilting his head with that expression he used when reviewing donor proposals for inconsistencies. How convenient. And what is this mysterious boyfriend like? Grace knew she should back down, admit the lie, laugh and say it was a bad joke. But his look, that mix of skepticism and something dangerously close to defiance, activated something in her. Some reserve of desperate courage she didn't even know she possessed. He's tall, she said, and the words started flowing as if they had a life of their own. Strong. He has intense dark eyes, the kind that… She paused for effect, holding his gaze steadily. The kind that would melt anyone who dared to get too close to me. He's quite protective. Elena made a strangled noise, her eyes sparkling at the direction of the conversation, and no longer resisting, she completed. A true wolf. Charles uncrossed his arms. The smile was definitely tenser now. Protective. I see. He stood up, smoothing his tie. And where did you meet this Adonis wolf protector? Why does that matter to you, Charles? Does he have a name? Of course he does. What is it? Grace hesitated for a dangerous fraction of a second. To you, it's wolf. She had no idea where the boldness had come from. It simply appeared on her tongue as if it had always been there waiting, while she thanked the heavens for Elena's earlier intervention. Charles made that sound that overly confident people make when they are internally questioning something, but externally feigning total indifference. Well, Grace, he said, picking up the coffee cups she hadn't touched. I can smell a lie from a distance. I have a sixth sense for these things. It's part of my job to assess sincerity in partnership proposals. He paused calculatingly, eyes narrowing slightly. But if you say it's true, it will be interesting to meet this wolf. Grace's stomach plummeted. Meet him? At the company Christmas party next Saturday. He smiled, and it was the kind of smile hunters make when setting traps. You're bringing him, aren't you? After all, boyfriends do that. They attend important events, they meet coworkers. Grace had the distinct feeling that she had just turned a simple problem into an epic mess, the kind that starts small and grows too fast. Of course, she heard her voice say, surprisingly firm. He will be there, by my side. Great. Charles headed for the door, then stopped and looked back. I can't wait to meet this man who is so protective. I'm sure it will be fascinating. And then he left, leaving a trail of expensive cologne and unresolved tension. Grace remained frozen in her chair for exactly 5 seconds. Then she collapsed, putting her face in her hands. Oh my God, she groaned. Oh my God, I lied. I lied blatantly, in front of witnesses, at work, about having a boyfriend, a passionate, jealous boyfriend. Elena exploded. She literally jumped out of her chair and ran to Grace's desk, pulling up a chair to sit so close that their knees touched. Grace, are you crazy? She whispered urgently. but her eyes were sparkling with something dangerously close to amusement, and a cheeky smile played on the corner of her lips. You invented a boyfriend. And not just any boyfriend. It was a magazine model boyfriend with people-melting eyes. No. Grace kept her hands on her face and, "You're not far behind. Where did you get the idea of a wolf?" Grace laughed nervously, and Elena accompanied her with bursts of laughter. "I panicked, Elena. He was pressuring me again and I just let it out. What do I do now?" Elena tapped her fingers on her lips, thoughtful, and then her eyes lit up with that expression that usually meant she had an idea that was either going to be brilliant or disastrous. "Wait, I have an idea. It doesn't solve the problem of the non-existent boyfriend, but at least it helps with immediate credibility." She grabbed her phone and dialed before Grace could protest. "Yes, hello? Bloom and petal florist? I need a bouquet. Beautiful, romantic, white and red roses if you have them." Elena winked at Grace as she spoke. "Delivery for Grace Holloway, Harmony Foundation." She recited the address, and the card should say, "Thinking of you, always, your Wolf." "Yes, Wolf. Deliver. Today, if possible, within the next 2 hours." "Perfect, thank you." Grace stared at her, mouth agape. "Elena." "What?" Elena put her phone away with an overly innocent expression. "You need proof. Charles is clearly suspicious. Flowers will give the story veracity, at least temporarily. But I'll have to return them when— No returning. You deserve them. For enduring that man and his inability to understand the word no." Elena held Grace's hands. "Now comes the hard part. We need to solve the real problem. You need a boyfriend for Saturday. A real boyfriend, or at least a convincingly fake one." Grace groaned again, leaning her forehead on the desk. The rest of the morning passed in an anxious haze. Grace tried to concentrate on work, reviewing schedules for the Christmas concert, confirming school participation, checking logistics details. But every time she looked up, she saw Charles. He walked through her area with a frequency suspiciously greater than usual. He looked. He watched, as if he was waiting for her facade to crumble. At 11:15, the flowers arrived. Marcus from reception personally came up to deliver them, because the bouquet was too large to fit in the service elevator. White and red roses in a stunning arrangement, wrapped in elegant craft paper with satin ribbon. The card hung delicately between the petals. "Someone has an admirer," Marcus hummed, placing the bouquet on Grace's desk. Grace picked up the card, with trembling fingers, feigning surprise even though she knew exactly what it said. "Thinking of you, always. Your Wolf." Your Wolf? She had to admit, Elena had outdone herself. It was exactly the kind of message an attentive, passionate, and territorial boyfriend would send. She let out an amused laugh, while nervously sweating cold. Second lie of the day. Across the open space, Charles looked up from his computer. His eyes met the flowers, his jaw visibly clenched. Grace put the card against her chest, allowing herself a small, genuine smile. Not for the fictional boyfriend, but for the friend who had her back. And since she had to sustain the lie, she might as well enjoy the sin just a little. Elena casually walked past her desk minutes later, pretending to borrow a pen, and whispered, "Am I a genius or not?" "You are my lifeline," Grace whispered back. "But this only buys me a few days. The party is Saturday." "I know. We'll think of something. I promise." The day dragged on in painful slowness. Grace ate lunch at her own desk, avoiding the break room where she knew Charles would likely be. She reviewed emails, updated spreadsheets, made calls to suppliers. Work was a safe refuge. Work made sense. Work didn't require her to invent fake boyfriends. At 3 in the afternoon, Charles walked past her desk again. This time he stopped, looking directly at the bouquet. "Beautiful flowers," he commented with an overly casual tone. "He has good taste. This boyfriend of yours." Significant pause. "If he exists." Grace lifted her chin, forcing a confidence she didn't feel. "He exists. And yes, he has great taste." Charles made that sound that didn't signify belief, but also didn't signify complete disbelief. Something in between. Something dangerous. 5 o'clock arrived like a liberation. Grace packed up her things with unusual haste, eager to escape before another embarrassing encounter. She was putting on her coat when Charles appeared. Again. Grace. She turned around, holding her purse against her body like a shield. Yes? He looked at her, then at the flowers she had carefully wrapped to take home, then back at her. I'm truly curious to meet this mysterious boyfriend at the party on Saturday. Grace swallowed hard, but kept her voice firm. Oh yes, as I said, he will certainly be there holding my hand. The third confirmed lie of the day. Perfect. If there was a manual for what not to do in December. She had just ignored every chapter. Charles nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. He was looking for breaks in the armor, cracks in the story, any sign that she was bluffing. Saturday. Got it. He gave that smile that didn't reach his eyes. You know, Grace, when you realize that I'm a better catch, a man who truly understands your value, your intelligence, your potential, well, I hope it won't be too late. And then he left, leaving Grace standing there with her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in her own ears. Elena appeared beside her seconds later, arms crossed. You really, genuinely, desperately need a boyfriend for Saturday. I know. The next day, Grace and Elena met in a cozy cafe in the West Village after work. The place was small and charming, with exposed brick walls, soft lights strung across the ceiling, and the comforting scent of freshly brewed coffee mixed with Christmas spices. Grace chose a corner table away from the window, where she could have some privacy to discuss the disaster her life had become. She nervously stirred her hot chocolate, watching the whipped cream melt into creamy spirals on the dark surface. Elena arrived 3 minutes later, huffing and pulling the red scarf from her neck. Traffic is awful. Everyone is Christmas shopping. She collapsed into the chair opposite Grace, ordered a cappuccino from the passing waitress, and then focused all her attention on her friend. So, situation. You have 4 days to produce a convincing boyfriend for a fancy work party, where your insistent stalker will be waiting to catch you in the lie. Grace groaned, resting her head on her hand. When you put it like that, it sounds even worse. Because it is worse, Queen. Elena picked up a croissant from the plate they had ordered to share and bit into it forcefully. But don't despair. I have a plan. Your last plan involves spending 50 sous dollars on flowers I sent to myself. And it worked. Charles looked less confident. I saw it on his face. Elena leaned forward, eyes sparkling. But now I need a more human solution. So I thought, I have a cousin, Miguel. He lives in Mexico but is visiting New York right now. Grace looked at her with an expression of pure horror. Elena, no. Listen, he's handsome, tall. He has those intense dark Latin eyes you described. Does he at least speak English? Elena paused. Define speaks. Elena! All right, all right! Elena held up her hands in surrender. Plan B then. We hire an actor. There are those websites for, I am not hiring an actor to pretend to be my boyfriend. That's too sad, even for me. Then what are you going to do? Elena looked at her with genuine concern now. Are you going to arrive at the party and confess you lied? Charles will humiliate you. He's one of those men who turn rejection into personal revenge. Grace knew. Her friend was right. Charles wouldn't accept the truth gracefully. He would use it as confirmation that she had played games with him, that she had been dishonest, that she deserved to be pressured even more. I don't know, she admitted miserably. Maybe I'll invent that he traveled. A last-minute emergency, or that we broke up. A whirlwind romance that ended before it started. That will only make Charles push harder. He'll see it as an opportunity. Elena chewed thoughtfully. You need a Christmas miracle, Grace. Or the courage to simply tell the truth and face the consequences. Or a handsome man who appears out of nowhere and agrees to pretend to be your boyfriend for one night. Elena said in a dreamy tone, looking up at the ceiling as if making a wish to the stars. Grace laughed without humor, taking a sip of her hot chocolate. Yes, because that happens in real life. Perfect men just fall from the sky offering selfless help to women in distress. At the next table, separated only by a low vase with winter flowers and the natural proximity of a crowded cafe, Andrew Bellamy looked up from the sketches scattered in front of him. He was in an informal meeting with 2 designers from Bellamy & Coas, reviewing ideas for the new jewelry collection that needed to be ready for launch early next year. But the conversation had lost his interest 15 minutes ago. The same ideas, the same safe designs. Nothing that inspired him. Nothing that made him feel that spark of creativity that used to define his work. And then he had heard the laugh. Light, musical, with a self-deprecating quality that made him instinctively look in the direction of the sound. The woman at the next table had light brown hair pulled back in one of those messy buns that looked accidental, but probably took effort. Loose strands framed a delicate face with light eyes that sparkled even in the cafe's soft lighting. She wore an oversized, wine-colored sweater over what looked like a simple dress, and her small hands held the hot chocolate mug as if it were a source of comfort. She was real, genuine, without the polished veneer that Andrew had learned to associate with all the women in his usual social circle. "Mr. Bellamy," one of the designers tried to recapture his attention. "What do you think of this piece?" Andrew vaguely looked at the sketch. "It's fine." Approved. He had no idea what he had just approved. John Hartford, his best friend and corporate lawyer who occasionally attended these meetings for reasons Andrew never fully questioned, followed his line of sight and smiled. "She's very beautiful," John said quietly, leaning in discreetly. "Who?" Andrew asked without conviction. "The girl you're looking at as if she were a rare sculpture at a Sotheby's auction." Andrew didn't reply, but he also didn't look away. The woman at the next table was clearly in the middle of an intense conversation with her friend, a vibrant Latina with dark hair who was gesturing dramatically as she spoke, and Andrew wasn't trying to listen. He really wasn't. But the cafe was quiet at that time of day, and some words simply drifted to him. "I need a boyfriend for a Christmas party, Elena. I invented everything. I'm desperate. Where am I going to find a tall man with dark hair and eyes that melt, smart Alex, who looks passionate and jealous, protective? Your Wolf Adonis protector really sounds like he came out of a perfect imaginary world." Andrew felt the corner of his mouth lift in an involuntary smile. What a peculiar description. So she had invented a boyfriend with very specific characteristics. Interesting. And judging by the urgency in her voice, she was clearly panicking about the consequences of that lie. He watched her take a sip of hot chocolate, saw the way she bit her lower lip when she was thinking, noticed how tense her shoulders were beneath the soft sweater. There was something about her, something that intrigued him in a way he couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the honest vulnerability. Maybe it was the fact that she clearly had no idea who he was. Or maybe it was simply because it had been a long, long time since anything or anyone had genuinely captured his attention. "You're going to do it, aren't you?" John asked, still in a low voice, but now with clear amusement in his tone. "Do what? Offer help to the damsel in distress you can't take your eyes off?" Andrew finally looked at his friend. "Maybe." "Why?" Good question. Andrew Bellamy had everything. Inherited and multiplied fortune. A successful company. An apartment in Manhattan with a view that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Interested women. So many he had stopped counting. So why was the idea of helping a stranger with a ridiculously small fake boyfriend problem catching his attention? "Because," Andrew said slowly, honestly, "it's been a long time since anything felt this interesting." His life had become a predictable sequence of meetings, obligatory social events, dinners where everyone wanted something from him, and relationships that never progressed beyond the superficial because neither party was truly invested. He was 38 and felt like he was living on emotional autopilot. And then this woman with hot chocolate and worried eyes appeared talking about Christmas lies and fictional boyfriends, and something in him woke up. Andrew put down his pen, the decision made. "Can we postpone some decisions?" he asked the designers. "These pieces don't seem to be what I'm looking for the new collection next year." The two exchanged confused glances but agreed, gathering their materials. John just shook his head, smiling. "Good luck with that," he murmured. "With what?" "With whatever you are about to start." Minutes later, Grace got to go to the restroom. She was walking back to her table, distracted looking at her phone, when the floor betrayed her. Someone had spilled water and hadn't cleaned it completely. Her foot slipped. She felt her balance go, arms automatically going forward to cushion the inevitable fall, when firm hands grabbed her arm. stabilizing her before she made full contact with the floor. "Careful." The voice was deep, warm, with that kind of natural confidence that didn't need to be proclaimed. Grace looked up and simply stopped breathing. The man holding her arm was precisely, impossibly the description she had invented the day before. Tall enough that she needed to tilt her head back to look at his face. Broad shoulders beneath an elegant dark gray wool coat. Dark brown hair with natural curls that were slightly disheveled in a way that looked intentional, but was probably just blessed genetics. And the eyes. My God, those eyes. Dark brown, almost black in the soft cafe light, but with a depth that seemed to suggest they saw much more than they showed. Grace realized she was staring. "Thank you. You're welcome." He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that should come with a warning. "The floor is treacherous today." He was still holding her arm, not possessively or inappropriately, just holding, as if making sure she was truly stable before letting go. "Yes," Grace managed to say. "Treacherous. Thank you. Again. For holding." Why was she repeating words? Why had her brain shut down? He slowly released her arm, and Grace walked back to the table in something close to a trance. Elena saw her coming, and her eyes immediately widened. "Grace," she whispered urgently as soon as her friend sat down. "Who is that?" "I don't know," Grace whispered back, trying not to look at the table next to them where the man had returned to sitting with two other men. "He just helped me not fall. He is exactly the description you gave of the fake boyfriend." "Exactly." Elena looked between Grace and the stranger. "Like, disturbingly exact." "I know," Grace said, and her voice sounded strange even to her own ears. They remained silent for a moment, both pretending to drink coffee while processing what had just happened. Then Elena broke the silence. "Grace, do you think—" "No," Grace interrupted firmly. "Whatever you're thinking, no. But you don't even know what I was going to—" "You were going to suggest that I ask that complete stranger to pretend to be my boyfriend because he fits the physical description I invented." Elena paused. "Maybe. Absolutely not. That would be insane. But he is perfect, literally perfect for the role. He really looks like a wolf Adonis. He could also be married, or a psychopath, or both." They fell silent again. Grace picked up her cup to take another sip of hot chocolate and realized her hands were trembling slightly. 5 minutes. Later she got up again. "I'm going to order more hot chocolate," she muttered to Elena. "I need sugar." In truth, she needed a distraction, something to do with her hands and stop thinking about dark brown eyes and how the world had a cruel enough sense of humor to place the charming physical embodiment of her fictional boyfriend in the same cafe at the exact moment she was discussing the problem. Grace went to the counter, stood in the small line behind two people, and tried to focus on the menu written in beautiful lettering on the blackboard behind the barista. "Do you come here often?" The voice came from beside her, and Grace didn't need to look to know who it was. She turned slowly, and yes, it was him. The man with the impossible eyes was standing next to her, hands in his coat pockets, casual expression, but intense eyes focused completely on her. "Sometimes," Grace replied, trying to sound normal and probably failing. "And you?" "First time," he admitted, tilting his head slightly. "But I'm enjoying it." Significant pause. "The atmosphere." Grace felt her face heat up. "It's cozy. Good place for talking. And honest," he added with that half-smile that should be illegal. She frowned slightly. "Honest? I apologize for overhearing," he said, and didn't look the least bit sorry. "But do you need a boyfriend for a party?" The blood drained from Grace's face so fast that she felt slightly dizzy. You heard?" Hard not to hear when someone describes a fictional boyfriend as tall, strong, with dark eyes that melt anyone. He tilted his head, studying her. Quite a specific description. Grace wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. Immediately. It's a long and very, extremely embarrassing story. Don't misunderstand me. I have time," he said simply. "And I love embarrassing stories. No judgment." Grace looked back to where Elena was not so discreetly observing the entire interaction with saucer-sized eyes. Her friend made exaggerated gestures of encouragement. Grace sighed. deciding that the level of humiliation was already so high that a little more wouldn't make a difference. I have a coworker who doesn't understand the word no. He constantly pressures me to go out. So I panicked after so many excuses and invented that I had a boyfriend. The words came out fast now, as if she were tearing off a band-aid. And now he wants to meet this boyfriend at the company Christmas party, which is Saturday. And I obviously don't have a boyfriend, so I'm basically doomed. He watched her throughout the explanation, his expression impossible to fully read, but there was something in his eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or interest. "And you don't have this boyfriend," he repeated, more an affirmation than a question. "No. So you're looking for one." Looking implies I have real options. I'm more desperately hoping for a last minute Christmas miracle. He laughed, and the sound was rich and genuine. "What an interesting coincidence. I'm tall, I have dark eyes. I guarantee I can look like I'd melt anyone." He gave a side smile that was both dangerous and devastating. "I was actually looking for something to do Saturday night." Grace blinked, processed, blinked again. What? "I can help. Be your fictional boyfriend, if you want." She let out a nervous laugh. "You're joking. I don't usually joke about serious offers. But you don't even know me." "True." He extended his hand, formal, charming. "So, Andrew Bellamy." Grace stared at the outstretched hand as if it were an alien artifact. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she shook it. The touch was electric. His hands were warm, firm, and the grip was confident without being crushing. Grace Holloway. "Pleased to meet you, Grace." He let go of her hand but didn't step back. "Now we know each other. The offer is still on." "The table." Grace opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Why would you do that?" Good question. Excellent question. A question that should be asked before accepting offers from strangers in coffee shops. Andrew considered for a moment, and then answered with an honesty that surprised her. "Because you seem to genuinely need help. Because the situation is absurd enough to be interesting. And because—" He paused, those dark eyes fixed on her in a way that made her stomach do something strange. He smiled lethally and finished, "I think I will enjoy playing your Wolf Adonis protector." Grace felt a blush cover every inch of her. Holy God, she should have listened to her mother's wise advice. "Don't lie, my daughter. Never. The bill for recklessness always comes, and usually without warning." She swallowed hard, trying to remember the last time she had confessed. That's what she needed. A priest and a confession, to get rid of that temptation in front of her. Before Grace could respond, before her brain processed what was happening, Elena appeared next to them like a hurricane of Latin energy. "Dios mío," she said, eyes going from Andrew to Grace and back. "You actually exist." Andrew turned his attention to her, clearly amused. "I exist?" "Yes, you are exactly the description of the boyfriend Grace invented yesterday." Elena had no filters. Zero. Tall, dark eyes, magazine model looks. She gestured dramatically at him. "Grace, you have been very good this year for Santa Claus to send you a gift of this magnitude." "Elena." Grace turned red to the roots of her hair. Again. "Sorry," Elena said, not sounding the least bit apologetic. "I'm Elena Martinez, her best friend, and you are apparently the Christmas miracle we were literally just discussing." Andrew smiled at Elena, then looked back at Grace. "Christmas miracle. I like the sound of that." Grace wanted to die. Honestly, she wanted the earth to open up. He offered to help," Grace explained weakly to Elena. "I know!" Elena practically shouted, then lowered her voice as she realized she was attracting attention. "I was listening. Well, not listening, just observing. And yes, maybe a little bit of lip reading." Andrew was clearly enjoying the whole situation. "So, Grace," he said, turning his attention completely back to her, "do you accept my offer? I have fun pretending to be your protective boyfriend for a night. You get rid of the persistent coworker, and we both gain an interesting story." Grace looked at him. Truly looked, trying to find the catch, the hidden motive. Something that explained why a clearly successful, sophisticated, and devastatingly handsome man would offer help to a complete stranger. but all she saw was sincerity, and perhaps a little bit of genuine amusement. "All right," she heard her own voice say. "I accept." Elena made a noise that was between a squeal and a gasp. "But," Grace quickly added, "we need to talk. Set rules, details, to appear convincing." "I completely agree," Andrew said. "How about we meet tomorrow? We can discuss the parameters of our arrangement." "Meet," Grace repeated, testing the word. "To plan," he clarified. But there was something in his tone that suggested it wasn't just about planning. Real boyfriends know details about each other. We need to be consistent if you want it to be convincing. "That is so romantic," Elena sighed. "It's not romantic," Grace said firmly, though her heart was beating too fast to corroborate the statement. "It's strategic. It can be both," Andrew replied with that devastating smile that was starting to become dangerously familiar. He pulled a business card from his inside coat pocket. It was elegant, minimalist, printed on thick ivory paper. Andrew Bellamy email. Phone. Just that. No company, no title, no information beyond the essential. Grace took the card, feeling the texture of the paper under her fingers. "You're a designer?" she asked, trying on impulse to understand who this man was. "Something like that. And you?" "I work at the Harmony Foundation." "What do you do there?" "I coordinate educational programs, art and music for young people." Something shifted in his eyes, deepened interest. "That's important. Beautiful work." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. It wasn't empty praise, it was genuine acknowledgement. "Thank you," she replied softly. Grace took a napkin from the pile on the counter, borrowed a pen from the barista, and wrote her phone number in careful handwriting. "For planning," she said, handing it to him. Andrew took the napkin as if it were an important document, carefully folding it and putting it in his pocket. "I'll be in touch soon, to confirm the meeting details." He held her gaze for a moment that lasted a second longer than socially necessary, then politely nodded to Elena and returned to his table. Grace stood there processing what had just happened. Elena pulled her by the arm back to their table, eyes shining. Grace, that man he is a stranger who offered help with a ridiculous problem," Grace completed, trying to sound rational. "He is a walking sin who looked at you the way a hungry man looks at a feast," Elena whispered intensely. "Did you see how he looked at you? How he put away that napkin? How he smiled?" "Elena, don't freak out. He's just being kind." "Kindness, my foot. Kindness is holding a door. That was interest. Real, intense, I want to get to know you better interest." Grace took a sip of the hot chocolate she had finally managed to order, trying to calm her nerves. "It's strategy. He's getting into the role of the attentive boyfriend." "Grace," Elena said with that look of someone who knew unspoken truths, "that man is not pretending anything, and you know it." At the next table, Andrew sat, back down with John, who was smiling broadly now. "So," John said quietly, "you just volunteered as a fake boyfriend for a complete stranger. Beautiful, but a stranger." "Yes." "Why?" Andrew looked in Grace's direction, observing the way she nervously stirred her hot chocolate, how she bit her lip when she listened to Elena, how everything about her seemed refreshingly genuine. "Because she's beautiful, intriguing, and real. Because it's been a long time since anything seemed interesting to me. And because," he paused, admitting the truth to himself, "because I want to get to know her better." And the proposition seemed too tempting. John shook his head, still smiling. "You think this is going to be simple? Pretend for one night, then each goes their separate way. What's the problem with that?" "The problem, my friend," John said, picking up his coat, "is that you, the controlled and emotionally unavailable magnate, are already looking at her the way men look when they are starting to get beautifully screwed." Later that night, Grace was at home, in the small one-bedroom apartment she shared with too many plants and enough books to open a library. She had taken a long shower, put on comfortable flannel pajamas, and was now on the sofa with a steaming cup of mint tea and a worn copy of Sense and Sensibility that she reread every Christmas. But she wasn't reading. She was staring at Andrew's card on the coffee table. Her phone vibrated. Message from an unknown number. "Hi, Grace, it's Andrew. Does breakfast work tomorrow? 8 a.m.? We need to plan our fake love story. A. She bit her lips, smiling despite the nervousness that made butterflies dance in her stomach. Grace. Breakfast works. Where? Andrew. I know the perfect place. I'll send you the address in a few minutes. Sleep well, his girlfriend. Grace let out a laugh, feeling her face heat up. She looked at the book open on her lap, at the favorite quote. Underlined years ago, half the world cannot understand the pleasures of the other half. She wondered which half she was, and which half Andrew was. Somewhere else across the city, in a minimalist penthouse with a panoramic view of illuminated Manhattan, Andrew Bellamy put a Chet Baker LP on the antique record player. The soft music filled the elegant but empty space. He looked at the napkin on the table, Grace's number written in delicate handwriting. He picked up his phone and searched Harmony Foundation NY. The website showed photos of events, young people learning instruments, children smiling, and there, in a photo of an educational concert, was Grace, surrounded by students, genuinely smiling at a small child holding a violin disproportionate to her size. Authentic, real, unposed. Andrew smiled, closing the browser. This is going to be interesting, he murmured to the empty apartment. And in two different parts of New York, two people who had met by chaotic chance, who had agreed to a temporary farce, who had no idea what was about to begin, went to sleep thinking about each other. The lie had begun, but something truer than either of them expected was silently taking root, and Christmas, with its peculiar magic of turning impossibilities into inevitabilities, was only just beginning to work. Andrew Bellamy did not get nervous. Nervousness was for insecure men, for those who didn't know exactly who they were or what they wanted. He had built a jewelry empire, navigated boardrooms full of corporate sharks, and dated women who could paralyze men with a single glance. Nervous was not part of his vocabulary, and yet, that Monday morning, standing in front of the mirror adjusting his tie for the third time, he had to admit there was something close to anticipation in his chest. Breakfast with Grace Holloway. To plan a farce? Simple as that. He chose a charcoal gray suit, a white shirt without a tie, casual but impeccable. His grandfather's heirloom watch, a wool coat. When he looked in the mirror one last time, John was leaning against the bedroom doorway with that annoying smile. You're overdressing for a strategic planning breakfast. I am dressing normally. You changed your shirt twice. I've known you for 20 years, Belle. You never change your shirt. Andrew grabbed his keys. She is different. I don't want to look too corporate. Or, John said, following him to the door, you want to impress her and are pretending you don't. Andrew didn't answer, because maybe there was an uncomfortable truth there. The cafe was on a quiet corner of the West Village, with reclaimed wood tables, plants hanging in the windows, and that comforting smell of fresh bread. Grace was already there when he arrived, sitting near the window with a cup of hot chocolate between her hands. She wore an oversized cream sweater, her hair down in soft waves, no makeup beyond a slight, gloss on her lips, simple, natural, and absolutely beautiful in a way that made something clench in his chest. She looked up as he approached, and a shy smile appeared. Hi. Andrew sat down, studying her. You arrived early. Habit. I hate being late. She stirred her chocolate nervously. Do you want to order something? He nodded to the waitress, ordered black coffee, and looked at the menu. Cinnamon biscuits. Something stirred in him, a distant and sweet memory. I'll have the cinnamon biscuits too. When the waitress brought them, Andrew picked one up and bit into it. The flavor exploded in his mouth, cinnamon and sugar and something more. Something that took him back to a sunny kitchen, grandmother in a floral apron, laughter. His eyes closed for an involuntary second. Good? Grace asked, observing his reaction. Very. My grandmother used to make these. The words came out before he could filter them. Unintentional vulnerability. Something shifted in her eyes, softened. Did she teach you? She tried. I was 12 and more interested in video games. Andrew smiled sadly. She passed away that year. I never learned the recipe. Grace was quiet for a moment, then said softly, good memories are gifts, even when they hurt a little. And somehow, coming from her, it didn't sound like a cliché. It sounded like lived truth. Andrew cleared his throat, returning to safe territory. So, Rules of our agreement. We need to establish a consistent story. Grace nodded, pulling a small notebook from her bag. Of course she had a notebook. How did we meet? She began, pen ready. Andrew leaned back, a smile emerging. Coffee shop. I overheard you needing a fake boyfriend, I offered. That's true enough. Andrew, people will ask for details. Then we adapt. We met through mutual friends. You were working an event my company sponsored. Instant connection. She wrote that down, biting her lower lip in concentration. Andrew watched the gesture, something warming in his stomach. How long have we been dating? 3 months, Andrew said. Long enough to be serious, not so long that people expect an engagement. Makes sense. More notes. Nicknames? He arched an eyebrow, feigning surprise, but inwardly already rooting for the moment she would reveal the nickname he had heard in the cafe. Couples have nicknames? He asked, pretending. Most do. Charles will be looking for convincing intimacy. Andrew leaned forward, slightly invading her space. What kind of intimacy did you have in mind, Grace? She blushed. Adorable. Verbal. Verbal intimacy, like, I don't know, honey? Too formal. Love? Too cliché. Then what? She was getting frustrated, cheeks still flushed. Andrew smiled slowly. You call me Drew. Nobody calls you Drew. Exactly. It will seem special. Or if you prefer, he teased, leaning towards her and speaking low just for her to hear. I'll call you Little Dove, and you can call me Wolf Adonis. It's much more suggestive and exclusive. She froze and felt the world sink beneath her feet. Heavens, that man had heard the whole conversation. Elena and her big mouth. Grace was sure he was the devil. She was certainly doomed. He couldn't help but smile at her embarrassment. Do girls still blush at compliments, even in the 21st century? Adorable. Right. Little Dove and Wolf. Hearing the nickname he gave her in his own voice made something strange happen. As if they had already crossed an invisible line. She really felt like a cornered little dove now. They spent the next hour building the story. Details about likes, dislikes, how he won her over, flowers, candlelight dinner, honesty. Grace took meticulous notes, and Andrew realized she was taking this more seriously than any project he had seen in weeks. You are very meticulous and organized, he observed. Lying is already bad enough. Lying badly is even worse. Technically, we are not lying, we are acting. It's the same thing. It's not. Actors don't lie. They perform. She looked at him with those clear green eyes. Do you always find a way to justify morally questionable things? Always. She should have looked disapproving. Instead, she was fighting a smile. On Tuesday afternoon, Andrew suggested they visit the winter market at Bryant Park. They needed to be seen together, he argued. Build physical comfort with each other. Grace agreed, meeting him after work. The park was transformed into a magical Christmas village, stalls selling crafts, lights strung on trees, ice skating in the background. Andrew showed up without a suit. Dark jeans, a gray cashmere sweater, a coat, hair slightly messy from the wind. Grace had to remind herself to breathe. Ready for our first public appearance as a couple? He extended his hand. She looked at his hand. Large, elegant, confident. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. The touch was electric, his fingers laced with hers with natural ease, and suddenly they were walking through the market holding hands as if they had been doing it for months. You're tense, Andrew murmured. I'm nervous, I don't usually do this. Hold hands? Pretend. Lie. Deceive people. He stopped, turning her to face him. Grace, no one is being hurt here. You're just protecting your personal space from someone who doesn't, respect boundaries. Relax. It still feels wrong. Then think of it this way, you are giving me an opportunity to do something good, to help someone in trouble at Christmas. Consider it a good deed. That can't be so wrong. The logic was twisted, but coming from him, it almost made sense. They continued walking. Andrew bought hot chocolate for her without asking, already knowing she preferred extra whipped cream. Grace mentioned he remembered, and Andrew replied that paying attention was his specialty. So, he said, stopping at a blown glass ornament stall, what does Christmas mean to you? Truly. Grace held her cup, looking at the lights around them. It means hope, a celebration of something greater than ourselves. Family gathered, tradition, gratitude for salvation, faith. Faith, Andrew repeated. Are you religious? Christian, but not the judgmental kind. At least I try not to be. She looked at him. And you? Pragmatic agnostic. I believe in what I can see and touch. That must be lonely. The observation caught him off guard. It wasn't an accusation. It was compassion. Sometimes, he admitted. My Christmas is usually a corporate event in December. Expensive champagne, empty conversations. I haven't had happy Christmas memories in years. Grace stopped walking, looking at him with those eyes that saw too much. That's sad, Andrew. It's pragmatic. No, it's lonely, like I said. And she was right. God, she was right. He changed the subject, picking up a delicate glass snowflake ornament. This one, it suits you. Why? Delicate, but resilient. Simple, but beautiful. Grace blushed again, and Andrew realized he loved doing that. He loved watching the flush rise on her cheeks. You are dangerously charming when you want to be, she murmured. Only when it's worth it. On Wednesday evening, Andrew took her to his favorite record store in the East Village, a cramped space full of LPs organized. By decade, vintage posters on the walls, the smell of old paper and nostalgia. Do you collect records? Grace asked, watching him browse the sections with the familiarity of a regular. Viciously. Digital music has no soul. He pulled out an Ella Fitzgerald LP. Listen to this on a vintage record player and it's transcendent. Grace smiled. You have a hidden romantic side. Hidden is right. He looked at her. Most people don't see it. Maybe you don't let them. Very perceptive. He showed her treasures. Miles Davis, Billie Holiday, Chet Baker. She mentioned that she loved reading while music played, that Jane Austen sounded better with smooth jazz. You read Austen? Andrew asked. Religiously. I reread Sense and Sensibility every Christmas. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Andrew quoted Pride and Prejudice from memory. Grace looked at him shocked. You read Jane Austen. My mother made me when I was a teenager. I thought I would hate it. I ended up reading all of them. Which is your favorite? Persuasion. You pierce my soul. I am half agony, half hope. The way he said it, looking directly at her, made the air between them charged. Grace looked away first, her breathing slightly uneven. You are full of surprises. You too, little dove. The nickname came naturally now, and she liked it. On Thursday evening, they had dinner at a discreet Italian place. They needed to rehearse, Andrew argued, practice answers to predictable questions. But the dinner didn't feel like a rehearsal. It felt real. Grace talked about her work, about the children she taught music to, about how their faces lit up when they understood a note. Andrew observed the animation in her eyes, the genuine passion, and realized he had never seen anyone so invested in something other than money or status. You truly believe you can change the world like that, he said. It wasn't a question. I believe I can change one child's world at a time, and maybe that's enough. Elena called in the middle of dinner. Grace answered laughing, and Andrew watched the transformation. She became even more animated, speaking half in English, half in Spanish, gesturing with her free hand. Natural, warm, completely unfiltered. When she hung up, she apologized. She wanted to know how it's going. And how is it going? Grace studied him. Honestly, better than I expected. You are more real than I thought you would be. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone more performative? You seem genuine. Maybe I am. Or maybe you're a good actor. Andrew leaned in, his voice low. Or maybe you make me want to be genuine. The blush returned. He would never tire of it. On Friday evening, the eve of the party, they walked through Rockefeller Center. The giant tree sparkled. Skaters spun on the ice. Snow began to fall in lazy flakes. Grace was quiet, and Andrew noticed something was bothering her. What is it? She sighed. I hate this. Lying. Deceiving people. Even if it's for a valid reason. Andrew stopped, turning her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. Then why did you accept my help? Grace looked at him, vulnerable. Because you didn't make me feel bad for needing it. You didn't judge me. I really needed to get rid of Charles's advances. And because, she hesitated, because, with you it doesn't feel like a lie. She swallowed hard. I mean, it would look convincing to cover up my Christmas lie. Andrew's heart stopped. He realized what she might have unconsciously suggested before trying to convince herself it was just theater. He was very close. He could smell her gentle perfume, see the snowflakes landing on her eyelashes, feel the warmth of her body even through their coats. He leaned in. She didn't pull away. His lips were inches from hers when a group of tourists walked past yelling, breaking the moment. Grace took a step back, laughing nervously. We should go. Tomorrow is the big day. Yes, the big day. But neither of them moved for 3 seconds too long. Later at home, Andrew called John. I'm screwed. I warned you. She is. John, she is different from anyone I've ever met. She doesn't want anything from me. I don't even think she has any idea who I am. She is kind, genuine, believes in good things, and we are falling in love. I'm starting to care too much, and I don't know what to do with that. You could try honesty. Tell her the truth after the party. Andrew laughed humorlessly. And say what? Hi, I agreed to pretend to be your boyfriend, but now I want it to be real? She will see me as a predator. Or she will see that you are a man who finally found something true. Andrew hung up, stood by the window looking at the city. 5 days. In 5 days, Grace Holloway had done something no one had been able to do in years. She had made him want more than what he already had. And tomorrow, he would have to pretend to be in love. When, terrifyingly, it might not be a pretense anymore. A wolf and his little dove. Grace was standing in front of the mirror, wearing the red dress Elena had insisted she buy 3 months ago. At the time, it seemed too extravagant. Now, with the fabric elegantly yet subtly caressing her curves, she understood why her friend had been so insistent. You look devastating, Elena said from the bed where she was sitting applying lipstick. That man is going to have a heart attack when he sees you. It's not about impressing him. It's about convincing Charles. Sure. Keep repeating that until you believe it yourself. Grace touched the delicate necklace on her neck, took a deep breath. Her phone vibrated. Andrew. On my way. Get ready, little dove. Tonight you are going to shine. She bit her lip, smiling, despite the nerves. Across town, Andrew adjusted his tie knot for the 4th time. The suit was charcoal gray, impeccably cut, a white shirt that enhanced his slightly tanned skin. John watched from the armchair, clearly amused. You're nervous. I'm strategic. You're in love. Andrew did not answer. He grabbed his coat, checked the inner pocket where he kept the gift for Grace, and left without looking back. When he rang the doorbell of her apartment, Grace answered after 10 seconds that felt like an eternity. And then there she was. The red dress hugged her body in a way that should be a crime. A discreet but sufficiently suggestive neckline, hair in loose waves over her shoulders, green eyes shining with nervousness and something more. She held an elegant coat. Andrew forgot how to breathe. You look, he began, his voice huskier than intended. Convincing? She offered, echoing their conversation from days ago. He took a step forward, invading her. Space, his eyes sweeping over her delicate beauty. You look absolutely stunning, my little dove. A blush rose on her cheeks, moving down her neck. She put on her coat, and Andrew couldn't take his eyes off her. Shall we go? She whispered. He offered his arm. Ready for your debut as my girlfriend? Ready to lie convincingly, you mean? Lying implies it's not true. He leaned in, his lips almost touching her ear. And something tells me tonight is going to be very real. The hall of the Harmony Foundation was transformed. Golden lights wrapped the space in a warm glow. Pine garlands interlaced with red ribbons adorned every column. Candles flickered in winter arrangements. Soft music floated through the air as people talked in elegant groups. Champagne circulating on silver trays. Andrew and Grace stopped at the entrance. He placed his hand on the base of her spine, possessive and protective. Breathe, he murmured. You are beautiful. I will look very much in love, and any man who dares to look at you will have to deal with me first. She let out a nervous laugh. You are taking this role of Wolf Adonis protector very seriously. I just enjoy being your jealous, territorial fake boyfriend." He smiled, but there was intensity in his dark eyes. "Now smile and introduce me to your colleagues." They walked in hand. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Grace felt all eyes on her, but especially one pair. Charles was near the bar in a navy suit, his eyes fixed on them with an unreadable expression. Andrew noticed immediately. "Is that him?" he asked quietly. "Yes." "Perfect." Andrew pulled Grace closer, his hand sliding from her waist to the curve of her hip. "Then let's put on a show." He guided her through the room, greeting people with natural charm, introducing himself only as Andrew, Grace's boyfriend. But the way he touched her, looked at her, protected her, made it clear that she was his. When they stopped to talk with a group of her colleagues, Andrew stood behind Grace, his hand on her waist, his thumb making lazy circles through the fabric of the dress. A small gesture, intimate, marking territory in the eyes of those watching. Grace tried to concentrate on the conversation, but all she could feel was his strangely comforting presence. "So you are the mysterious boyfriend," one of the colleagues said, smiling at Andrew. "Mysterious?" Andrew tilted his head. "I prefer dedicated. She deserves someone who values her." He kissed the top of Grace's head, a gesture so natural that she almost believed it was real. Charles approached. Andrew instantly felt the tension in Grace's body. "Grace," Charles said, a forced smile. "You look beautiful tonight." "Thank you, Charles." Charles looked at Andrew, assessing him. "And you must be the famous boyfriend." Andrew extended his hand, the grip too firm to be friendly. "Andrew Bellamy. And you are Charles, I imagine." "Grace?" "Mentioned you." "Mentioned me?" Charles arched an eyebrow. "Yes. Said she has an insistent colleague at work." Andrew smiled, but there was no warmth. "I imagine it's difficult for men to accept when an exceptional woman like Grace is unavailable." Charles's jaw clenched. Grace felt Andrew's hand squeeze her waist slightly, pulling her even closer. Then he did something completely unexpected. He leaned his head down, his nose brushing her hair, taking a deep breath as if absorbing her. Scent. Grace's eyes widened, her body going stiff. "Your insistent admirer is watching," Andrew whispered against her hair, his voice low just for her to hear. "I'm just marking territory. Relax." She tried, but having Andrew so close, feeling his breath against her skin, was unsettling in ways she wasn't prepared for. Charles watched the scene a few steps away, seeing exactly what Andrew wanted him to see. She was taken. "Well," Charles said, his voice strained, "it seems Grace really found someone protective, like a wolf." Andrew replied, his eyes fixed on Charles. "Challenging. And I protect what is mine." Charles backed away, nodded stiffly, and walked off. As soon as he was out of earshot, Grace whispered, "That was intense. That was necessary." Andrew turned her to face him. "And extremely pleasurable to execute. You are convincing everyone, Drew. Excellent Wolf Adonis Protector performance." His eyes darkened. "You inspire me, little dove." She blushed, and he smiled, satisfied. Elena appeared like a hurricane of energy, pulling Grace into a hug. "You two are killing it. I saw Charles practically choke on his champagne." Andrew laughed, clearly liking Grace's friend. "Elena, right? Grace talks a lot about you. All good things, I hope. All hilarious and loyal things." Elena melted. They talked for a few minutes, Grace relaxing for the first time that night, laughing at something Elena said. Andrew watched, enchanted, by the way she lit up when she was comfortable. Then Grace walked over to the drinks table, alone for a moment. Lorelei, an elegant colleague in a black dress, approached, her eyes wide. "Grace, are you dating Andrew Bellamy?" Yes, that Greek god, the most exclusive and coveted jewelry magnate in the country? How did you manage that?" Grace almost choked on her champagne. Her world tilted. Magnate, jewelry, Bellamy. She looked at Andrew across the room. He waved, a charming smile, completely comfortable in the role of rich and powerful man. "I need to... Excuse me, Lorelei. Andrew is calling me." Grace crossed the room, pulling Andrew into a secluded hallway. He followed, instant concern in his eyes. "What happened? Who are you?" she asked, her voice more confused than accusatory. For real? He tilted his head. I thought we were past the formal introduction phase. I'm Andrew Bellamy. Don't you remember? For real, Andrew. She crossed her arms, not in anger, but with something close to bewilderment. You mentioned you were a businessman, but what exactly do you do? Andrew sighed, running a hand through his hair. I am the CEO of Bellamy & Co., chief designer, heir to one of the most prestigious jewelry houses in the country. Her eyes widened. Jewelry houses, prestigious. She let out an incredulous laugh. Of course. Why didn't you mention that? You didn't recognize me, he said simply. No one recognizes me when I'm not. At a corporate event surrounded by security and assistants. I thought it would be refreshing. Refreshing. She repeated the word as if testing its taste. Andrew, doesn't that information seem a little too relevant to simply omit? I almost played the fool when Lorelei recognized you, and I didn't even have any idea who you were in your world. Grace, I almost got into a delicate situation for not knowing something relevant about you. Why didn't you really tell me? He took a step forward, not trapping her against the wall, but close enough that she had to lift her chin to meet his eyes. Because for the first time in years, he said, his voice low and honest, someone looked at me as Andrew. Just Andrew. Not as the Bellamy magnate. Not as a bank account or a useful connection. You looked at me as a man. He touched her face delicately. And I wanted you to keep looking at me that way. At least for a few days. Her breath hitched. That's not fair. No? He smiled sadly, but it was too selfish to resist. Grace looked at him, really looked, and saw the vulnerability in his dark eyes. This powerful, confident man who commanded an empire was standing there asking her to see him. Just him. Andrew. Then they heard a voice echoing over the microphone. Grace's boss was on stage asking for attention. Before we continue with the festivities, the voice echoed through the hall, I'd like to recognize some exceptional members of our team. People who not only do their job, but transform lives. Grace and Andrew returned to the main hall. She tried to pull away, but he kept his hand on the base of her spine, comforting. This year, our award for excellence in educational program management goes to someone who expanded our reach by 40%, brought 15 new schools into the program, and personally mentors 20 young musicians. Grace Holloway, please come to the stage. The hall erupted in applause. Grace froze. Andrew gently nudged her. Go. You deserve it. She walked onto the stage in a state of graceful shock, accepted the small crystal trophy, and looked at the crowd of familiar faces. I didn't expect this, she began, her voice soft but clear. This job isn't about numbers or recognition. It's about seeing an 8-year-old child hold a violin for the first time and discovering that music can be a transformative agent in their life. It's about young people who had no hope finding purpose through art. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. Simple, genuine, perfectly Grace. Andrew watched from the back of the room, something tightening painfully in his chest. Pride, admiration, and something dangerously close to feelings. Charles started moving toward the stage during the applause, a determined expression. Andrew didn't think. He simply moved. He crossed the hall in long, purposeful strides, got on stage before Charles took 3 steps, and when he reached Grace, the entire world disappeared. Congratulations, sweetheart, he said, his voice clear enough for the whole room to hear, but his eyes only on her. You deserve every word of this recognition, my little dove. He took her hand and placed a kiss on her knuckles. Not quick, not casual. A long, reverent kiss, old-fashioned in its execution but devastating in its impact. The entire room saw. Charles stopped halfway, defeat finally settling in his eyes. He saw the way Andrew looked at Grace, the way she leaned into him instinctively, and he understood that he had lost a battle that was never his to win. The hired photographer approached, camera raised. A photo of the couple, to mark the moment? Grace instinctively recoiled, her eyes wide. No, I don't think that, Andrew realized immediately. She was thinking about the difference between them, about his world of gala events and tabloids, about the people in his circle who might see and question. He held her waist firmly but gently. Grace, he said low, just for her. "The only people who will see this photo are your colleagues and supporters of the foundation. People who admire you." He smiled, touching her chin. "And even if the whole world saw, I would be honored to be by your side. This is your night to shine. Will you let me be a part of it?" She looked at him, searching for a lie, finding only sincerity. "But you are. Your boyfriend, at least for tonight, and your boyfriend wants to record the moment you receive the recognition you absolutely deserve." He pulled her closer. "Come on, love. Smile for me." The flash went off. Grace against Andrew's chest, him looking at her as if she were the only person in the universe, her looking up with surprise and something dangerously close to enchantment. When the photographer stepped away, Grace continued looking at Andrew, intrigued. How could he be so attentive to a farce? How did every gesture seem so real? When they both knew it was a performance? Elena passed Charles on the way out, unable to resist. "So, Charles, I guess Grace really landed the best catch in the city. A true Greek god who is also a protective wolf. Admirable, isn't it?" She shrugged. "She is indeed a lucky woman." Charles left without responding, defeat weighing on his shoulders. Later, in the car, a comfortable but charged silence hung between them. Snow began to fall lazily, flakes dancing under streetlights as Andrew drove through the decorated streets of Manhattan. When he parked in front of her apartment, Grace hesitated. "Wait," she said softly. "I have something for you. Don't leave the car, I'll be right back." She quickly went up, returning minutes later with a red coat over her dress, protecting herself from the December cold, carrying 2 carefully wrapped boxes. Andrew got out of the car, meeting her on the sidewalk under the snow. "Grace, you didn't have to." "I did." She held out the boxes, her cheeks flushed with cold and something more. "Merry early Christmas as a thank you for everything." He opened the first larger box. Inside was an LP he had casually mentioned at the record store. A rare edition. Impossible to find. "How did you get this?" "I called 3 different collectors. One of them had it." She smiled shyly. "I paid attention when you said you were looking for it." Something tightened in his chest. The second box was smaller. He opened it, and the aroma hit him instantly. Cinnamon biscuits wrapped in parchment paper with a delicate ribbon. Handmade, with care. For him. Andrew felt his eyes sting. "You made these?" "I used a traditional family recipe. I thought, you said your grandmother made them, and I wanted you to have that memory back, even if it's not exactly the same." It was the most thoughtful, most caring, most genuinely generous gesture anyone had done for him in years. She had listened. She had cared enough to turn a casual conversation into a meaningful gift. He didn't trust his own voice, so he just pulled her into a tight hug, his face buried in her hair. "Thank you," he murmured. "This means more than you know." When they pulled apart, he took a small box from his coat pocket. "Coincidentally, I have something too." Grace looked at the box, then at him. "Andrew, you didn't have to. Open it. I want to know if you'll like it." She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a bracelet, delicate and different from anything she had ever seen. The charm was a dove sculpted in silver, small blue crystals shining like snowflakes in the bird's eyes. "It's too beautiful," she whispered. "But I can't accept something so. I designed it for you." Andrew interrupted softly. "Personally. This dove does not exist in any catalog, in any collection. It exists only for you." She looked up, her eyes shining. "Why?" "Because that's how I see you." He took the bracelet, carefully fastening it on her wrist next to the first one. "Pure, delicate, gentle, simple in a way that makes you absolutely unique. You are a dove in a world of ravens, Grace, and you deserve something as special as you are." She swallowed hard, too touched for words. Inside, Andrew was fighting conflicting thoughts. He had started this as fun, a temporary distraction, an opportunity to be just Andrew for a few days. But now, standing under the falling snow with this woman holding gifts she had carefully chosen, he realized with terrifying clarity. He was captive, completely, and she was saying goodbye. "Thank you for everything," Grace said, smiling but with finality in her tone. "For helping me with Charles, for making it so convincing. You were perfect." "Were?" Past tense, as if the agreement ended there. Grace, you truly saved me. She held the box against her chest, and I'll never forget it. A goodbye. That was a goodbye. Inside her, a silent storm. His intense gazes, the attention to the smallest details, the kindness even when no one was watching. It confused everything. It made her want things she couldn't have. It made her forget it was a farce. They looked at each other under the snow. Silent world, suspended moment. Andrew leaned in, kissed her cheek. Long, tender, a promise of unsaid things. Merry Christmas, little dove. He whispered against her skin. Merry Christmas, Drew. She went inside. He watched until the light in her apartment came on. Grace leaned against the closed door, touching the new bracelet, feeling the echo of the kiss still burning on her cheek. Confused, touched, trembling. Andrew returned to the car, opened the box of biscuits. He ate one slowly, closing his eyes, savoring the cinnamon and sugar and her thoughtfulness. Both knew nothing would be the same. The wolf had found his dove, and she, without realizing it, was already liking him more than she should. But neither of them knew how to say it out loud. Not yet. The morning of December 23rd dawned gray over Manhattan, the sky heavy with the promise of snow. Grace was standing in front of her building with a small suitcase at her feet, waiting for the Uber that would take her to Connecticut. She adjusted her scarf, her breath forming white clouds in the freezing air. Her phone vibrated. It was Andrew. Have a safe trip. Be careful on the road. Snow is forecast for the afternoon. She looked at the message, her thumb hesitating over the keyboard. After the party night, they hadn't spoken, as if both needed distance to process what had happened, what was still happening. Grace, thank you for everything. Have a blessed Christmas. Formal, safe, final. The car arrived. She put away her phone, grabbed her suitcase, and left without looking back. Across town, Andrew was standing at his apartment window, watching the snow begin to fall. Her message glowed on his phone screen. Have a blessed Christmas. As if it were a permanent farewell. He touched the box of cinnamon biscuits on the kitchen counter. Half of them were still there. He had eaten them slowly, savoring them, trying to make them last. His phone rang. It was John. Melissa is making enough turkey to feed an army. Come for Christmas dinner tomorrow. The girls will love seeing you. Thanks, but I'm staying here. Bellamy, you can't spend Christmas alone. I won't be alone. I have work to do. A lie. Both of them knew it. It's about her, isn't it? Andrew didn't answer. You're in love. I'm screwed. Welcome to the club. John laughed softly. But seriously, the offer stands. Show up if you change your mind. When he hung up, Andrew looked around the apartment. Minimalist. Modern, empty, no Christmas decorations, no tree, no sign that it was a time for celebration. Exactly as his life had been for the past few years. Until Grace. In Connecticut, Grace opened the door to her parents' house and was immediately enveloped in warm hugs and the smell of cinnamon. The house was exactly as she remembered it. A Christmas tree in the corner of the living room with ornaments from generations, a wreath on the door, soft white lights, stockings hanging on the fireplace. Gracie! Her mother, Margaret, squeezed her tight. You're thinner. Aren't you eating right? I'm fine, Mom. Aunt Grace! Two small hurricanes, Noah, 6, and Lily, 4, collided with her legs. Her sister, Sarah, appeared from the kitchen in an apron, a wide smile. You made it. Come on, I need help with the pies. The following hours passed in familiar comfort. Grace helped in the kitchen, played with her nephews, talked to her father about the work at the foundation. But her mind constantly wandered. She touched the bracelet on her wrist without realizing it. The dove pendant shone softly under the tree lights. In the evening, the whole family went to a celebration at the small church. Grace had attended since childhood. The choir was singing Silent Night when she walked in, and something inside her tightened. During the sermon about hope and new beginnings, Grace closed her eyes, her fingers wrapping around the bracelet. She prayed. She didn't know exactly for what, but she prayed. When she opened her eyes, Sarah was looking at her with that older sister smile that knows things. Later, in the kitchen, preparing hot chocolate, Sarah finally asked, "Who is he?" Grace almost dropped the mug. "Who? The man who put that look on your face." Sarah pointed to the bracelet. And who gave you that shiny, beautiful piece of jewelry? Grace looked at the bracelet, then at her sister. It's complicated. Love usually is. It's not love, it was an agreement. I needed a fake boyfriend for a work party. He offered to help. It's over, that's it. Grace. Sarah held her hands. I've known you since you were born, and you have never, ever looked at a bracelet the way you're looking at this one. So tell me, who is he? Grace took a deep breath. Andrew Bellamy. He is the CEO of the most famous and exclusive jewelry house in NY. He's the brand's designer. He designs his own jewelry, and completely out of my league. Does he know that? Know what? That you think he's out of your league. Because any man with working eyes would see that he would be lucky to have you. Grace smiled sadly. It's not that simple. It never is. Sarah squeezed her hands. But he's worth it. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Andrew was in the silent apartment with only the city lights illuminating the space. He had put the LP Grace had given him on the record player. Chet Baker filled the silence. On the coffee table, the open box of biscuits. He ate one slowly, closing his eyes, savoring. Cinnamon and sugar and her thoughtfulness. The apartment had never felt so empty. His phone showed 11:47 p.m., almost midnight, almost Christmas. He looked at the screen, his fingers hesitating. He shouldn't. She had said goodbye. She had gone back to her life. He should let her go. But then 11:59 p.m. turned to 12 a.m., and his phone lit up. Message from Grace. Merry Christmas, Andrew. He smiled, something warm spreading in his chest. He replied immediately. Merry Christmas, Grace. I miss you. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Me too. 2 words, but they changed everything. He typed back. How is the family? Home. Chaotic. Loud. Perfect. How is it there? Silent. Lonely. Eating your biscuits slowly to make them last. I made 2 batches. I have more saved for when I get back. When I get back. Not if. When. When do you get back? January 2nd. You? I didn't travel. I stayed in NY. Alone? I prefer it that way. Wrong company is worse than loneliness. And the right company is in Connecticut. Probably wearing ridiculously cute Christmas pajamas and drinking hot chocolate. On the other side, Grace laughed out loud, looking down at her flannel pajamas with reindeer. How do you know? I pay attention. It's my specialty, remember? She bit her lip, her heart racing. Andrew. Yes? Thank you. For everything. Truly. Grace. Yes? You weren't just an agreement to me. I want you to know that. She stared at the message for too long. She didn't know how to respond. Then she chose honesty. You weren't either. Good night, Drew. Merry Christmas. Good night, little dove. Sleep well. Grace held the phone against her chest, smiling at the dark ceiling of her childhood bedroom. On Christmas morning, the Holloway house woke up with the chaotic energy of children and the smell of coffee. Grace went downstairs and found the whole family gathered for the traditional breakfast. Gifts were opened. Laughter filled the room. Noah got a Lego set that immediately spread across the floor. Lily got a doll she didn't let go of all day. Grace got books as always, and didn't mind at all, but all day long she checked her phone. At 2 p.m., a new message. It was Andrew. He sent a photo of an old Nat King Cole LP. Found it in a vintage store. It reminded me of you. The Christmas song. Classic. It's beautiful. Are you hunting for records on Christmas? I have to do something to keep from thinking about you all day. Is it working? Not even a little bit. She smiled, her cheeks flushing. That evening at 8 p.m. he called. He didn't text. He called. Grace was in her room and answered on the second ring. Hi. Hi. His voice was warm over the line. Sorry to call, I just wanted to hear you. You don't need to apologize. A comfortable silence. How was your day? He asked. Chaotic, nephews and sugar ecstasy. My brother-in-law tried to assemble a new bike and almost broke his foot. Normal. She laughed. And yours? Silent. John insisted I go over for dessert. I ended up going. His daughters made me wear a reindeer tiara. Grace burst into laughter. I would pay to see that. There's a photo. Melissa ensured full documentation of my humiliation. They talked for 2 hours. talking about many things, about Christmas, family, childhood memories, forgotten dreams. When they finally hung up, Grace realized she was smiling so much her cheeks hurt. In the following days, between Christmas and New Year's, Andrew tried to dive into work. The new collection needed to be ready for launch next year, but every design the team presented seemed dead. This one, a young designer presented, inspired by Art Deco, geometric lines, bold. No, Andrew barely looked. Next, this one is more organic. Look at the lines. Generic. Next, maybe if we go back to the minimalist approach. We already did that. Andrew pushed all the sketches aside. None of this is working. The room fell into a tense silence. One of the senior designers, Sophie, cleared her throat. Mr. Bellamy, with all due respect, what exactly are you looking for? Andrew looked at the scattered designs. Hard lines, cold geometry, all technically perfect and completely soulless. I don't know, he admitted, but I'll know it when I see it. The meetings continued like this for the next few days. Frustration growing, the team confused. Andrew increasingly restless. On the 30th, John showed up at his office unannounced. You're destroying team morale. I'm pursuing excellence. You're being impossible. John sat down. 6 meetings in 3 days. You rejected everything. Talented designers are starting to question themselves. Then they need to work better. Bellamy. John stared at him. It's not about them. It's about you. You're blocked. I'm demanding. You're blocked because she's not here. Andrew froze. I don't know what you're talking about. Grace, you're blocked because you're thinking about her instead of thinking about jewelry. And nothing they present will be good enough because nothing is her. Andrew was silent for too long. I'm in trouble, aren't I? Completely. John smiled, but in a beautiful way. She's back in 2 days. And what are you going to do? I don't know. Andrew ran a hand through his hair. She said goodbye, thanked me for the help, as if it were over. Do you want it to be over? No. Then don't let it end. John stood up. You've spent your whole life building empires, Andrew. Winning a woman should be easy. She's not just a woman. Exactly, she's the woman. So stop wasting time on designs that don't inspire you and go after what really matters. When John left, Andrew was alone in the office. He grabbed a blank sheet of paper, a pen, and started drawing. Not geometric shapes, not minimalist lines. He drew soft curves, delicacy, lightness. He drew a dove in flight. He drew grace. And for the first time in days, something clicked. On the night of December 31st, Grace was on the sofa in her parents' living room, watching fireworks explode on TV as the family celebrated. But her mind was in Manhattan. At 11:58 p.m., she went out to the porch, breathing the freezing winter air. New message. Happy New Year, little dove. May this year bring you everything you deserve. She typed back, her fingers trembling slightly. Happy New Year, Drew. See you soon. 3 dots. Then, I can't wait. And Grace knew, with absolute and terrifying certainty, that everything had changed. The agreement was over, but something new was just beginning. Grace returned to Manhattan on January the 2nd under a gray sky that threatened snow. The city still had Christmas decorations in the shop windows, but the streets had already returned to their usual frantic pace, as if Christmas had been just a brief pause before the world resumed its normal speed. She left her suitcase in the apartment and went straight to work the next morning, hoping to immerse herself in her familiar routine and forget the confusion Andrew Bellamy had caused in her perfectly organized life. It didn't work. Elena met her in the hallway before she even reached her desk. You won't believe it. She practically skipped, pulling Grace into an empty meeting room. The boss wants to see you now. Why? Did I do something wrong? On the contrary, Queen. Elena was beaming. Just go, and then tell me everything. With a pounding heart, Grace knocked on the door of Richard Morrison's office, the executive director of the Harmony Foundation. Grace, come in. He was smiling, which was a good sign. Have a seat. She sat down, her hands clasped in her lap. I wanted to congratulate you again, Richard began. Your work over the past year has been exceptional. The program expansion, the new partners, the measurable impact on the schools. You have exceeded all expectations. Thank you, sir. And because of that, he interrupted. Still smiling. The board has approved a premium vacation for you, 15 days, paid, starting whenever you want in the next 3 months. Grace blinked. Premium vacation? You deserve it, Grace. Use it to rest, travel, do whatever you want. Just let me know a week in advance when you plan to take it. When she left the office, still processing, Elena was waiting at the door. So, 15 days of premium vacation. Elena shrieked, then covered her own mouth when she realized. She was in the office. That's incredible. You totally deserve it. We are celebrating. That night, they went to a small Italian restaurant they frequented. 2 glasses of wine later, Grace finally relaxed. So, Elena said with that mischievous look, are you going to tell me what happened with the Greek god over Christmas? Grace touched the bracelet unconsciously. Nothing. I was in Connecticut. He was in New York. But did you talk? Maybe. Grace. We exchanged messages. He called on Christmas. We talked for a bit. Elena leaned in, her eyes shining. And nothing. It was nice. Comfortable. Like we were real friends. Friends. Elena rolled her eyes. Queen, that man does not look at you like a friend. And you don't get all melted when you talk about him if he were just a friend. I don't melt. You are melting right now. Grace took a large sip of wine to hide the blush. 3 days later, everything changed. Grace was at her desk, reviewing the schedule for a February concert when her phone started exploding. Messages, calls, notifications. Elena ran over, her eyes wide, holding her own cell phone. Grace, did you see? See what? Elena turned the screen. It was a Manhattan gossip blog, one of the biggest. The photo was there. Their photo from the Christmas party. Grace in the red dress, Andrew in an impeccable suit, him looking at her as if she were the only human being on the planet. And the headline. In bold letters, who is the woman who stole magnate Andrew Bellamy's heart? Grace's blood ran cold. Oh my God. Read the article. Grace took the cell phone with trembling hands. Andrew Bellamy, 38, CEO of the renowned Bellamy & Co., and one of New York's most coveted bachelors, was photographed in an intimate moment with a mysterious woman during a December charity event. Close sources confirm the lucky lady is Grace Holloway, 27, educational programs coordinator at the Harmony Foundation. The couple appears deeply in love, with Bellamy showing rare public affection. It continued, with more photos, different angles, a close-up of his face looking at her. Oh, Jesus, now I'm in trouble. What is he going to say when he sees this? Grace whispered. What is he going to say? I think he's going to love it. He's the one who wanted to take the photo, remember? Ah, my friend, you're going to be famous. Elena was practically jumping. Grace, you're on every blog. Manhattan elite, society pages, luxury lifestyle, everyone. Grace wanted to hide under the desk. The lie had gone too far. This is a nightmare, Elena. We are from different worlds. He can have any woman he wants in this city. This is incredible. You are the woman who conquered the unconquerable Andrew Bellamy. Grace felt nausea rise. I need to get out of here. She grabbed her bag and practically ran out of the building, Elena calling after her. In the street, snow was beginning to fall. Grace walked aimlessly, trying to process. The photos, the headlines, the whole world thinking they were a real couple. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered automatically. Hello? Grace Holloway? A female voice, professional. Yes. I'm from the Manhattan Social Journal. We'd like to do an interview about your relationship with Andrew Bellamy. Can we schedule? Grace hung up, her hands shaking. The phone rang again. Another unknown number. She hung up without answering. 3 more calls. She turned off her cell phone completely. She needed to think. She needed to understand how this had happened. The photo had been taken weeks ago. Why go viral now? She didn't realize where she was walking until she found herself in front of the coffee shop where she had met Andrew. The same cafe where it all began. She took a deep breath and walked in. She ordered her traditional hot chocolate, sat at the same corner table. She tried to organize her thoughts. 20 minutes later, someone slid into the chair in front of her. She looked up. Andrew. He was wearing a dark coat, a scarf, his hair slightly messy from the snow, worried eyes fixed on her. How did you know I was here? She asked. Elena called me. Said you ran out of the office in a panic after seeing the photos. He studied her face. I came to the only place that would make sense. Photos, plural. Did you see them? All of Manhattan did. He signaled to the waitress, ordered coffee. Then he looked back at Grace. I'm sorry, I didn't expect it to go viral like this. How did this happen? The photo was taken weeks ago. Someone from the party must have sold it to the blogs. He ran a hand through his hair. It happens, my life is public, anything I do becomes news, I should have warned you. They're calling me, journalists asking for interviews. Don't answer, my PR team will handle it. Grace let out a humorless laugh. Your PR team, of course, because you have a PR team to deal with invasion of privacy. Grace, I don't belong in that world, Andrew. She looked at him, vulnerable. I coordinate educational programs. I live in a one-bedroom apartment with too many plants. My idea of a fancy dinner is an Italian restaurant that accepts coupons. This, she vaguely gestured to the phone, this is not my life. It doesn't have to be. The attention will pass. It always passes. Easy for you to say you were born into it. He was quiet for a moment. You're right, I was born into it and I hate every second of it. He leaned forward. But meeting you reminded me that there is life outside of it. Real life. Hot chocolate in a small cafe. Conversations that matter. People who care about things besides money and status. Grace felt something tighten in her chest. Andrew. His phone rang. He looked at it, sighed. My mother. She calls 3 times in a row when she wants something urgent. He answered, gesturing for permission and moving away for a few minutes. Hello, Mom. Yes, I'll be there with you. Wouldn't miss it for anything. For a few seconds, he just listened and nodded, frowning and trying to suppress a laugh. Yes, I saw the photos. No, it's not. Mom, it's okay. Yes, see you soon. Bye. He hung up and approached her with an expression half amused, half resigned. She saw the photos. Grace's eyes widened. And? She wants to meet. You little dove. Officially. He took a deep breath. My parents' wedding anniversary party is coming up. Emerald anniversary, 40 years of marriage. It's next weekend in the Hamptons. She insists I bring my girlfriend. He emphasized the word with air quotes and a smug smile. Grace felt the floor disappear. But I'm not your girlfriend. Holy God. This lie is going too far. I know. But she saw the photos. The whole family saw them. And they are very excited. He smiled sadly, making a scene worthy of an Oscar. But it's just that you would be the first woman I've taken to any family event in all these years. They think it's serious. I couldn't say no to them. Andrew, this is worse. Lying to strangers at a work party is one thing. Lying to your family is, I know what I'm asking. He took her hand across the table. And you can say no. But Grace, now I'm the one who needs your help. Only this time it's different. How is it different? He held her gaze. Because this time maybe it's not entirely a lie. Her heart stopped. What are you saying? I'm saying I didn't fake anything at that party. I didn't fake it when I held your hand. I didn't fake it when I looked at you as if you were the only person in the room. I didn't fake it when I spent Christmas alone eating your biscuits and missing you. He squeezed her hand. I'm saying I'm going to my parents' party. And if you don't go with me, I'll have to pretend I'm not. In love with you. That will be the lie, Grace, not the other way around. She couldn't breathe. Andrew, what are you saying? We barely know each other. I know. It's insane. It's too fast. But it's true. He smiled. So come with me. Meet my family. And then when we get back, we can figure out what this is. For real. No lies. No farces. Just the two of us. Grace looked at his hand holding hers. At his dark eyes full of hope and vulnerability. She should say no. It was obvious she should say no. When is the party? She heard her own voice ask. Next weekend, Friday to Sunday. I have 15 days of approved vacation. He smiled, excited. Is that a yes? I'm going to regret this, but I can't say no to you. I'll take it. I think we can extend our weekend and make better use of those 15 vacation days. What do you think? He smiled slowly, satisfied. God help me, Andrew. God help me. In the following days, Grace tried to convince herself that she had made a rational decision. It didn't work. Elena was ecstatic. "You're going to meet the Bellamy family. Grace, this is serious." "It's not serious. It's a favor. I'm just returning his kindness for helping me." "A favor is lending a dress. This is meeting the parents." Grace groaned, burying her face in her hands. On Thursday night, Andrew showed up at her apartment with coffee and bagels. "I came to align the story," he said when she opened the door. "At 8 at night? Best time to think clearly." They sat on her small couch, the coffee cooling as they talked, but not about the fake story, about childhood, dreams, fears, hopes. Grace discovered that he had been raised mainly by his grandmother because his parents constantly traveled for work, that he had learned to design jewelry at 10 years old, that his first love had been interested in his money, not him. Andrew discovered that she had grown up in a house full of love but little money, that she had paid for college with scholarships and 3 jobs, that she still sent money to her parents whenever necessary. At midnight, when he should have left hours ago, they were sitting too close, talking too softly, looking too intensely. "Grace," he whispered. "Andrew, no." "Why not?" "Because you are you, and I am me, and this doesn't make sense. The best things never do." He leaned in. She didn't pull back, but at the last second, she turned her face. His lips brushed her cheek. "Not yet," she whispered. "Not until I know what's real, that it's not just the intensity of the moment." He rested his forehead against hers. "All right, I'll wait." When he left, Grace leaned against the closed door, her heart beating wildly. She was in love, completely, irrevocably, and she was terrified. On Friday morning, Andrew picked up Grace at her apartment. An elegant car, a discreet driver, her small suitcase next to his in the trunk. "Ready?" he asked. "No." "Perfect. Let's go." During the 2-hour drive to the Hamptons, they talked, laughed. He held her hand, and Grace realized with terrifying clarity she was in danger. Not the kind that could hurt her physically, the kind that could break her heart into 1,000 pieces. But when Andrew smiled at her, his eyes full of promise, she decided that maybe it was worth the risk. The Bellamy property in the Hamptons was exactly the kind of place Grace had seen in magazines but never imagined visiting. The colonial-style house stretched elegantly against the winter sky, tall windows reflecting the golden afternoon light, and an impeccable lawn disappearing toward the ocean that shimmered in the distance. "It's big," Grace murmured as the car pulled up to the circular driveway. Andrew laughed softly. "My parents don't do anything halfway." Before he could get out, the front door opened, and an elegant woman with gray hair pulled back in a low bun practically floated down the stairs. Catherine Bellamy wore a beige cashmere sweater and tailored pants, a delicate pearl necklace around her neck, but what Grace noticed first was the genuine warm smile. "Andrew!" Catherine hugged him tightly, then turned to Grace, her blue eyes sparkling. "And you must be Grace. My goodness, you are even more beautiful in person than in the photos." Grace felt her face warm up. "Mrs. Bellamy, it's a pleasure." "Catherine, please." "Mrs. makes me feel old." She took Grace's hands, studying her face with maternal attention. "Welcome, dear. We are so happy you came." Thomas Bellamy appeared at the door, a tall, broad-shouldered man with gray hair and dark eyes identical to his son's. He had the same quiet, confident presence as Andrew, but softened by decades of evident love for the woman beside him. "So this is the young woman who finally captured my son's attention." He extended his hand, his grip firm but gentle. "Thomas Bellamy, it's a pleasure to meet you, Grace." "The pleasure is mine, sir." "Thomas," he corrected with a smile. "We are family here." Family. The word echoed strangely in Grace's chest. The interior of the house was elegant but surprisingly welcoming. A stone fireplace dominated the living room, comfortable sofas arranged around it, and family photographs covering the walls in varied frames. It was not the minimalist coldness Grace expected. It was a home. "Let me show you to your room, dear," Catherine said, guiding Grace up the stairs while Andrew and his father brought up the luggage. "Andrew said you work with arts education?" "Yes, I coordinate music programs for young people in public schools." "What wonderful work." Catherine stopped at the top of the stairs, turning completely. Education is the foundation of everything, isn't it? Thomas and I donate to several educational foundations. You must tell me more about your program. The guest room had an ocean view, a king-size bed with immaculate white bedding and fresh flowers on the side table. It's beautiful, Grace breathed. Andrew is in the room next door, Catherine indicated with her head. But I'm keeping you in separate rooms out of respect. I hope you don't mind. Grace blinked, surprised by the consideration. No, of course not, thank you. Catherine smiled, touching her arm. My son seems different since he met you. Lighter, more present. Whatever you did, thank you. Before Grace could reply that, she hadn't done anything. Catherine was already going down the stairs. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, but the atmosphere was anything but stiff. Thomas opened wine. Catherine served roast lamb with potatoes and vegetables, and the conversation flowed naturally. Grace, Thomas said, filling her glass, Andrew mentioned that you grew up in Connecticut? Yes, in a small town near Woodbridge. My parents still live there? And what do they do? My father is a high school teacher. History. My mother runs the family bakery. Catherine brightened. Bakery, how charming. You must have grown up surrounded by sweets. And a few extra pounds, Grace laughed. My mother is always testing new recipes. The house always smells of cinnamon or chocolate. Andrew watched Grace talking to his parents, completely natural, without artifice. She wasn't trying to impress. She was just being herself, and his parents were completely enchanted. And your faith? Catherine asked gently. Andrew mentioned that you are a practicing Christian. Grace hesitated only for a second. I am. I hope that's not a problem. Not at all. Catherine exchanged a look with her husband. Thomas and I were raised in the church. We drifted away over the years with work and travel, but we always value Christian values. It's comforting to know that there are still young people who maintain that connection. My parents always said that faith is not about religion. It's about how you treat people, how you live your life based on truth, mercy, and love. Wise words, Thomas agreed. After dinner, Catherine insisted on showing photo albums to Grace. Andrew groaned. Mom, no. Quiet, dear. Grace needs to get to know you properly. They sat in the living room, the fireplace crackling, albums spread on the coffee table. Grace saw Andrew as a child, dark hair and wild curls, eyes too big for his face, a shy smile. This is him at 7, Catherine pointed. Just won his first riding competition. You used to ride? Grace looked at Andrew. I still ride. Occasionally. He was a champion, Thomas said with obvious pride. 3 consecutive years in the junior competitions. More photos. Andrew as a teenager, all long, clumsy legs. Andrew with his grandmother, both covered in flour in a sunny kitchen. Andrew holding a trophy, genuinely smiling. He was lonely, Catherine said softly. Thomas and I traveled a lot for work. My mother, his grandmother, practically raised him. She died when he was 12. That's when everything changed, Thomas added. Little by little, he closed himself off. He dove into his studies, then into work. He was never the boy who laughed easily again. Grace looked at Andrew. He was studying his own hands. Until now, Catherine continued, looking between them. Until you. Later, when his parents retired for the night, Andrew took Grace upstairs. Want to see something? Embarrassing, little dove? He asked. She felt a gentle shiver run down her spine. It was always like that when she heard his deep voice call her by the affectionate nickname. Always. He opened a door in the hallway. His teenage room was preserved like a time capsule. Single bed, wooden desk, crowded bookshelf. But what caught Grace's attention were the details. Riding trophies lined a shelf, medals hanging on the wall, photos of him with horses, genuine and rare smiles, stacks of LPs next to a vintage record player, and books, hundreds of them. Grace ran her delicate fingers over the titles. Pride and Prejudice, Emma, Persuasion. She looked at him. A complete Austen collection. Refuge, he admitted. When I felt alone. Bronte, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy. She pulled out a worn volume. Anna Karenina with markings in the margins. I read compulsively. It was easier than dealing with real people. Grace turned to face him completely. You weren't just a rich, Lonely boy. You were sensitive, romantic, looking for connection on pages because you couldn't find it in real life. He took a step towards her. Until now. Andrew, he never brought anyone here, you know. They both turned. Catherine was at the door, a gentle smile. In all these years, girlfriends came and went, but never here. This place, this house, is important to him. So the fact that you are here, seeing all this. She paused, her eyes sparkling. You are special, Grace. And I hope you know that. She disappeared down the hall, leaving them alone. Grace looked around the room again, seeing Andrew in a completely new way. Not the confident, provocative CEO, not the rich magnate, but the boy who had hidden in books and music, looking for something he had finally found. Grace, he whispered. I know, she replied. I see you. For real. On Saturday night, the Emerald Anniversary Party transformed the house into a fairy tale setting. Soft lights, white, and silver flowers, live music floating through the air. 50 guests, close friends, family, business partners, elegant but warm. Grace wore a navy blue dress that Andrew had insisted on buying for her. A refined and elegant cut, enhancing her eyes. You look beautiful, he murmured when she came down the stairs. You've said that 3 times already. I'll say it 20 more times before the night is over. During the event, Grace talked naturally with the guests. She discussed educational programs with influential people in high society. She spoke about the importance of art in the development of young people with a retired dean. She shared her faith quietly when asked, without being preachy or defensive. Andrew watched from afar, talking to an uncle, but his attention always on her. He saw the way she lit up talking about the children she taught, how she touched people's arms when she laughed, how she was genuinely interested in every conversation. Thomas appeared beside him. She's special. I know. You love her. It wasn't a question. I'm starting to realize that, yes. Then don't let her get away. Thomas looked at his own wife across the room. 40 years passed in a flash, and I don't regret a single day. When you find the right person, Andrew, you know it, and you fight for her. Later, Andrew found Grace alone in the garden, watching the ocean under the moon. Running away from the party? He asked, placing his coat over her shoulders. Just breathing the cool night air. Your family is wonderful. They loved you. They don't really know me. How can you say that? You were completely transparent and natural. Even in a short time, I'm sure they know enough. He turned her to face him. Grace, I need to tell you something. Andrew, this scares me. I know. It scares me too. We are very different. Yes, and isn't that wonderful? We are perfectly complementary. Andrew, he kissed her forehead, long and tender. You don't have to say anything now, just think about it. About us. About what could be if you allowed yourself. On Sunday morning, Grace woke up early and went downstairs for coffee. She found Andrew on the porch reading the newspaper, a steaming cup of coffee beside him. Good morning, she said softly. He looked up, a slow smile appearing. Good morning, little dove. Did you sleep well? Better than in weeks. She sat down beside him, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. Are your parents awake? Still sleeping. The party was long yesterday. He watched her take the first sip. Thank you for coming, for meeting them. I know it wasn't easy. It was easier than I imagined. They are warm, real. They loved you. Grace smiled, touching the bracelet on her wrist. Your mother showed me more photos last night. You were a lovely child. I was a walking disaster. With impossible curls and a mischievous smile. She tilted her head. What happened to that boy? Andrew was quiet for a moment. He grew up, he learned that showing feelings hurts, that trusting is dangerous, that it's safer to keep a distance. And now? He looked at her, vulnerable. Now he met someone who makes him want to risk it again. Grace felt tears threaten, but she smiled. That someone is scared too. Then let's be scared together. The drive back to Manhattan was charged with silence. Andrew drove, his free hand intertwined with hers on the center console. Grace looked out the window, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The weekend had changed everything. She had seen the real Andrew. She had met his family. She had allowed herself to imagine a future that previously seemed impossible. But there was still fear. Fear of not being enough, of living in his world and losing herself, of loving so much that when it ended, if it ended, she wouldn't survive. "What are you thinking about?" Andrew asked softly. "How fast?" "Everything changed." "Did it change for the better?" She looked at him. Strong profile, defined jaw, eyes fixed on the road, hand holding hers as if he would never let go. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I want to find out." He smiled, squeezing her hand. "That's all I need to hear." When they arrived at her apartment, he got out to fetch her suitcase. At the door, they hesitated. "So," he began. "So," she echoed. "Can I call you Andrew? You don't need to ask permission. I want to do everything right this time. I don't want to rush. I don't want to pressure." She touched his face. "Call me." He kissed the palm of her hand, then her forehead, lingering. "I'm going to miss you." "Me too." He left. Grace walked in, leaned against the closed door, holding her suitcase. 3 weeks, she thought. Andrew had mentioned that the next 3 weeks would be insane with the creation of the new collection. A tight deadline. Immense pressure. 3 weeks without seeing him. She should feel relieved. She should use the time to think clearly, to organize her feelings. But all she felt was longing. And on the other side of the city, Andrew plunged into the most obsessive creation of his life. Drawing, redrawing, perfecting. Every piece had to be perfect, because every piece was for her. 3 weeks, 21 days of feverish creation, of messages exchanged late at night, of growing longing. But for the first time in years, creation didn't feel like work. It felt like purpose. John showed up on a Thursday evening, finding Andrew still hunched over sketches, the light from the drafting table the only illumination in the dark atelier. "Bellamy, it's 11 at night. I know what time it is. Have you eaten?" Andrew looked at the cold coffee cup beside him. "A sandwich." John sighed, pulling up a chair and sitting next to his friend. He looked at the scattered drawings. Delicacy, lightness. Every line had intention. Every curve told a story. "This is your best work," John said softly. "And you know why." Andrew paused, his pencil suspended over the paper. "Because it's her." "Have you talked to Grace in the past few weeks?" "Messages. She's busy with the spring concert at the schools. I'm busy with this." He gestured to the drawings. "But I miss her so much. All the time." "Then why are you hiding here?" "I'm not hiding. I'm creating something worthy of her." "Man, she doesn't need jewelry. She needs you." Andrew finally looked at his friend. "I need to finish this first. You know my deadline is hanging by a thread, and it needs to be perfect. Because when I show it to her, when she understands what it means, I want it to be the perfect moment. No distractions, no half-truths." "Are you going to tell her about the collection?" "I am. At the launch gala, in front of everyone. She will know that it's not a secret, that I'm not ashamed, that she is everything." John smiled. "You are completely lost, my friend." Hopelessly. A few days later, the collection was almost complete. 15 pieces, each one unique, each one Grace. Andrew picked up the phone before he could talk himself out of it. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Drew?" Hearing her voice after weeks of only messages made something inside him melt. "Hi, little dove." "Hi." He heard the smile in her voice. "Are you okay? Have you been working too much?" "Maybe, but I'm finishing." He took a deep breath. "Grace, I need to see you, please." Silence on the other side. Then, "When? Tonight? Tomorrow? Anytime you can. I just need to be near you." "Tonight works. Where?" "That Italian restaurant. The small one in the West Village. 7 o'clock? I'll be there." Andrew arrived 20 minutes early, nervous in a way he hadn't felt since adolescence. He had reserved a corner table, discreet but with a view of the street illuminated by old lamps. He ordered the wine she liked. He adjusted his tie for the 3rd time, and then she walked in. Grace wore a simple wine-colored dress, her hair loose in natural waves, minimal makeup. She was the definition of effortless grace. When her eyes met his across the restaurant, she smiled and Andrew felt like he could breathe again. "Hi," she said as she reached the table. He stood up, pulled out her chair for her. "Hi, you look beautiful. You look tired. She touched his face softly. Haven't you been sleeping? Not much, but it was worth it. They ordered. They talked about the last few weeks. She told him about the concert she had organized, about a 9-year-old girl who had played the violin for the first time in public and cried with happiness afterwards. He talked vaguely about work, avoiding details, saving the surprise. But throughout the meal there was a tension, anticipation, something unsaid hovering between them. When desserts arrived, tiramisu for her, coffee for him, Andrew finally couldn't wait any longer. Grace, I need to tell you something. She put down her fork, her eyes fixed on him. I'm listening. He took her hand across the table. These 3 weeks were the longest of my life. I worked obsessively, diving into creation in a way I hadn't in years, and it was incredible. But you know what I realized? None of it matters if I don't have you to share it with. He squeezed her hand. Meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. You came in as a temporary favor, a farce that was supposed to last one night, and somehow you became the most real thing I've ever had. Tears began to shine in her eyes. I don't want to pretend anymore, he continued, his voice firm but emotional. I don't want to be your fake boyfriend. I don't want to hide what I feel. Grace, I want a real commitment, public, true. I want to take you out to dinner without you feeling insecure, worrying about who sees us. I want to wake up thinking about you and go to sleep doing the same. I want you, for real, if you'll have me. Grace was crying now, tears silently running down her cheeks. Are you sure of what you're asking? Because I'm not from your world, Andrew. I don't know how to be the girlfriend of someone like you. I don't know how to deal with the attention, with the expectations. You just need to be you, exactly as you are, because it's you I love, Grace. Not an edited version, not a public persona. You, with hot chocolate and Austen books and an unwavering faith in good things. You who sees beauty in a child playing the violin. You who made cinnamon biscuits because you heard a story about my grandmother. You. Are you saying, you have real feelings for me? She whispered. Yes, in fact, I love you, desperately. I love you too, she admitted, her voice breaking. I tried not to love you. I tried to be rational, but you see me in a way no one ever has. And I can no longer pretend that this hasn't changed everything. Because, God forgive me for this, but you were the lie I enjoyed telling the most in my life. Andrew stood up, pulling her close. In the middle of the restaurant, with other customers discreetly watching, he held her face between his hands. Then let this be real. Let me love you the way you deserve. Yes, she whispered. Yes. He leaned in, and finally, his lips found hers. The kiss was soft at first, almost reverent. Years of waiting, weeks of longing, days of anticipation, all merging in that moment. When she sighed against his mouth, he deepened the kiss, pulling her closer, and Grace felt the whole world disappear. There was no more fear. There was no more doubt. Only truth. Only love. Only them. When they finally separated, both breathing raggedly, Andrew rested his forehead against hers. My little dove. My wolf Adonis, she whispered back, and for the first time, it wasn't a nickname from a farce. It was a promise. The following weeks were the happiest of Grace's life. Andrew took her to see the company, showed her the atelier where he created, though he carefully avoided showing the new collection. She took him to the school where she taught, introduced him to the children she talked about so much, and Andrew watched her transform a classroom into an improvised orchestra. They had dinner at discreet restaurants. They walked through Central Park in the snow. They listened to LPs in his apartment while she read and he sketched. They drank hot chocolate in small cafes and talked for hours. Her friend Elena was ecstatic. You are radiant, literally glowing. I'm happy, Grace admitted. Happy? Queen, you're in love, and he's worse. I saw the way he looks at you. That man adores you. And it was true. Andrew didn't hide it. He held her hand in public. He kissed her forehead in restaurants. He posted a photo of them together, discreetly, just a profile on social media with a simple caption, my favorite person. The tabloids had a field day, but Grace discovered that when Andrew was by her side, the attention wasn't so scary. In early April, Andrew showed up at her apartment with a bouquet of white lilies and a nervous expression. "I have something to ask you." "I'm listening." "The launch gala for the new collection is next week, Friday night, and I want you there, not as my date, as the guest of honor." Grace blinked. "Guest of honor? Andrew, it's your collection, your moment." "It's our moment." He took her hands. "Trust me, please. Just this last time, trust me blindly, and I promise everything will make sense." There was something in his eyes. Mystery, anticipation, love. "All right," she agreed. "I'll trust you." He smiled, pulling her into a long kiss. "You won't regret it." Elena was immediately called in for operation. Find perfect dress for impossible gala. "It needs to be stunning," Elena declared. "You're going to be the center of attention." "I won't be, it's Andrew's event." "Naive queen," Elena sighed. "When are you going to realize? To him, everything is about you." The night before the gala, Andrew called late. "I can't sleep," he admitted. "Nervous?" "Actually very excited and hopeful." He paused. "Grace, tomorrow everything is going to change. Again. For the better? Forever." Grace didn't completely understand, but she trusted him, and maybe that was enough. Friday afternoon found Grace in her apartment surrounded by organized chaos. Elena had arrived at 2 in the afternoon with a makeup case, 3 shoe options, and enough energy to power all of Manhattan. "Okay, we're doing this right," Elena declared, opening the case. "Hair, makeup, dress in that order, and you're going to be so stunning that Andrew will forget his own name." Grace laughed nervously, looking at the dress hanging on the closet door. Andrew had sent it the previous afternoon with a simple note. "To my muse, wear this tonight. A." The dress was a work of art, champagne-colored silk that shimmered softly under the light, an impeccable cut that would hug every curve, an elegant but modest neckline, and a subtly open back, delicate yet impactful. Exactly how Andrew saw her. "This man has impeccable taste," Helena murmured, touching the fabric with reverence. "And he's completely gone for you." "I'm nervous," Grace admitted, sitting in front of the mirror while Elena started working on her hair. "Why, you've already met his family. You're publicly dating. This is just a work event. It's his night. The launch he's worked on for months. New York's elite will be there. The press, critics." Grace wrung her hands nervously. "What if I mess something up? What if I don't fit in?" Elena stopped, placing her hands on Grace's shoulders, looking at her through the mirror. "Queen, listen. Andrew Bellamy, the man who can have any woman in New York, chose you. Not by accident, not for convenience, because you are exactly what he needs. So take a deep breath, put on that stunning dress, and shine, because tonight is going to change your life." At 6:30, Grace was ready. Hair in soft waves, makeup highlighting her green eyes, the dress falling perfectly. Elena had insisted on a delicate necklace, borrowed, nothing too flashy, and simple earrings. "You are perfect," Elena whispered, her eyes shining. "He's going to die." The limousine arrived at 7 sharp, but it wasn't the driver waiting at the door. It was Andrew. He was in an impeccable tuxedo, a bow tie, his hair tamed but with some rebellious curls. When he saw Grace descending the building stairs, he simply stopped, his hand rising to his heart. "Grace," he breathed as she approached. There are no words. "You look very handsome too." He took her hand, kissing her knuckles. "Ready?" "No, but let's go anyway." He smiled, helping her into the car. The gallery in Chelsea was transformed. Soft lights, white flowers and crystals, instrumental music flowing. Photographers waited outside, flashes popping as cars arrived. When Andrew and Grace stepped out of the limousine, the volume of flashes tripled. "Andrew, look here. Who is the date? Is that the girlfriend? Grace Holloway?" Grace felt panic rising, but Andrew simply intertwined his fingers with hers, pulling her close. "Breathe," he murmured. "Smile, and remember, you belong in this world. My world with me." They walked the red carpet, Andrew occasionally stopping for photos, always with Grace by his side, his hand on the small of her back, possessive, proud. Inside, the gallery was packed. New York's elite in their best attire, champagne circulating, and in the center, covered by elegant veils, the pieces of the new collection. Grace recognized some faces from magazines, celebrities, magnates, art critics whose reviews could make or break careers. Andrew, an older man, approached, a wide smile. "We are eager for the presentation. The rumors about this collection are insane." "Marcus." Andrew shook his hand. "Let me introduce you to Grace Holloway." Grace, Marcus Rivera, critic for Art and Luxury magazine. "A pleasure," Grace said, hoping her voice didn't tremble. Marcus studied her with clear interest. "So you are the famous Grace. Andrew hasn't stopped talking about you. I see he has very good taste." "I haven't stopped at all," Andrew agreed without any shame. "She really is beautiful, isn't she?" More introductions, more conversations. Grace found herself discussing arts education with a philanthropist, music programs with a retired maestro, and the importance of cultural accessibility with a museum curator. And slowly, the nervousness dissipated. These were conversations she knew, passions she shared. Andrew watched closely, pride stamped on his face. 8:30. The lights dimmed. A signal. "It's time," Andrew murmured, leading Grace to the front of the hall where chairs were arranged in a semicircle around a small stage. He seated her in the front row, next to Elena, who had arrived minutes before and was now holding Grace's hand tightly. "Are you okay?" Elena whispered. "I think so." Andrew stepped onto the stage. The spotlights illuminated him. The hall became completely silent. "Good evening," he began, his voice clear and confident. "Thank you for being here for the launch of the new Bellamy & Co. collection. This collection is unlike anything I have ever created," he signaled. Veils began to be removed, revealing the pieces. Grace held her breath. Every piece of jewelry was stunning, delicate, light, soft curves, nothing angular or harsh. Necklaces with feather-shaped pendants, earrings that looked like flowers captured in silver, bracelets with chains so fine they seemed almost ethereal, and in several pieces, recurring like a signature, small doves, in flight, at rest, stylized but unmistakable. "I spent years creating technically perfect jewelry," Andrew continued, "but without soul, without purpose beyond superficial beauty. And then I met someone who reminded me what beauty truly means." He looked directly at Grace. "This collection is named Grace, and every piece was inspired by her delicacy that hides unbreakable strength, by her purity of spirit in a world that tries to complicate everything, by her grace in the deepest sense of the word, in dealing with everyone around her." Tears began to shine in Grace's eyes. "This dove," he pointed to a central pendant, "represents who she is. A symbol of peace, hope, love, simple yet profound, delicate but resilient." He stepped down from the stage, walked to Grace and extended his hand. "And now I want to present my muse, my inspiration, my love, Grace Holloway." The hall erupted in applause. Grace was frozen, tears streaming freely now. Elena gently nudged her. "Go, it's your moment." With trembling legs, Grace took Andrew's hand, letting him guide her to the stage. Under the lights, facing hundreds of faces, she finally understood. It wasn't about the jewelry. It was about her, about what she meant to him. "Grace," Andrew said softly, just to her, "you transformed my life, and I wanted the world to know." She couldn't speak. She just held his hand tightly, crying and smiling at the same time. Elena was crying in the front row. Catherine and Thomas Bellamy, whom Grace hadn't realized were present, were standing and applauding. John was discreetly wiping his eyes. The applause continued. Flashes popped, and Grace realized that her life had just completely changed. Later, after the formal presentations, after the critics examined each piece, after the champagne and city lights sparkled below them, the surprisingly clear sky showing stars. "Are you okay?" he asked, taking off his jacket and placing it over her shoulders. Andrew, you named an entire collection after me, in front of everyone, that is, public, permanent, exactly like my love for you." He turned her to face him. "Grace, I spent my whole life creating beautiful but empty things. And then, you showed up and showed me what creation with soul truly means." Grace looked at him with such admiration and gratitude that her eyes overflowed with tears. He took a deep breath, and then, under the starry sky of Manhattan, he knelt down. Grace's world came to a complete stop. "Grace Holloway," he began, taking a small box from his pocket. "You entered my life as a sweet and amusing temporary lie, and you became the most important truth I have ever known." He opened the box. Inside was a breathtaking ring, a delicate platinum band, and in the center a stylized dove with open wings, each feather encrusted with tiny diamonds. Simple, elegant, unique. "I designed this personally. There is no other like it in the world, just as there is no other you." Tears shone in his eyes now. "Grace, you made me want to be a better man. You gave me purpose. You gave me back the happy feeling of being alive and feeling. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you the way you deserve?" Grace was sobbing now, her hands covering her mouth. "Yes," she managed to say through the tears. "Yes, I accept, my beautiful wolf." Andrew slid the ring onto her finger with slightly trembling hands, then stood up, pulling her into a kiss that held the promise of forever. When they separated, both laughing and crying at the same time, he rested his head against her neck, feeling the soft scent of her hair. "My little dove, my wolf," she whispered, "forever." And there, on the top of Manhattan, under the stars that bore witness, a Christmas lie transformed into the most beautiful promise of a lifetime. Spring was beginning to awaken over Connecticut when Andrew drove through the roads, still lined with residual winter snow. Grace, in the passenger seat, nervously adjusted her engagement ring, looking out the window at the familiar landscape of her childhood. "Nervous?" she asked, turning to him. "Terrified," he admitted, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "I'm about to officially ask for their daughter's hand, and I've never met them before." "They already love you," Grace assured, placing her hand over his. "My mother calls me every week asking about you, and my father, well, he saw our photos together in all the newspapers." "That reassures me greatly," Andrew said sarcastically, but he was smiling. "Drew, relax. You conquered the New York elite with a jewelry collection. You can conquer a retired Connecticut teacher. The New York elite is not the father of the woman I love." Grace squeezed his hand, touched. "It will be perfect. I promise." The Holloway's house appeared around the corner, a cozy two-story building with a large porch, a garden still dormant from winter but with the first signs of life sprouting. It was the complete opposite of the elegance of the Hamptons, but it had something that immediately caught Andrew's attention. It was a real home. Before they finished parking, the front door opened and Margaret Holloway appeared, wiping her hands on her apron, a warm smile on her face. "Grace, you're here." She quickly descended the steps, pulling her daughter into a tight hug before Grace even reached the porch. Then she turned to Andrew, her eyes shining. "And you must be Andrew. My goodness, you are even more handsome in person than in the photos." "Mom!" Grace blushed. "What?" "I'm just telling the truth." Margaret pulled Andrew into a hug before he could offer a formal handshake. "Welcome, dear. Come in, come in. I just made hot chocolate and cinnamon biscuits. Grace told me you liked them." "Thank you very much, Mrs. Holloway. That's very kind." "Margaret, please. We're family now." David Holloway appeared in the doorway, a broad-shouldered man with gray hair, reading glasses hanging from the neck of his flannel shirt. He observed Andrew for a moment that seemed like an eternity, then descended the steps with measured strides. "Mr. Holloway." Andrew extended his hand, swallowing his nervousness. "It's an honor to finally meet you." David shook his hand with a firmness that was a clear assessment. "Andrew, I've heard a lot about you." A meaningful pause. "Shall we take a walk after lunch?" It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. "Of course, sir." "David," he corrected, but the tone remained serious. Lunch was served in the dining room that smelled of cinnamon and love. Margaret had prepared a feast: roast turkey, potatoes, vegetables, apple pie for dessert. The table was set with an embroidered tablecloth and china that were clearly family treasures. Conversation flowed, mainly guided by Margaret, who asked 1,000 questions about the collection, the gala, and Andrew's parents. Grace held his hand under the table, silent support. David remained quiet for the most part, watching, assessing. After dessert, he pushed his chair back. "Andrew, how about that walk?" The backyard extended into a lawn, still brown from winter, to a small grove where the first green sprouts were beginning to appear. They walked in heavy silence, only the sound of twigs breaking underfoot. Finally, near an old oak tree, David stopped and turned around. "My Grace has always been special, since she was born." His voice was soft but firm. Too kind for a cruel world sometimes. Too trusting of people. Sees good where others see opportunity. Andrew remained quiet, letting the man speak. "When she called me a while ago saying she had met someone, I was worried, especially when I found out who you were. Magnate, a completely different world from hers." David crossed his arms. "So I'm going to be direct. Do you love her? For real? Or is she just another one?" "Sir, David," Andrew corrected, looking the man in the eyes. "Grace is the only one, the first and the last. She came into my life when I was living on autopilot, just existing, and she showed me what true living means. I love her more than anything in this world. And when life gets tough, when the media attention is too much, when the differences in worlds start to weigh heavily, I'll be by her side, protecting her, supporting her, loving her." Andrew took a deep breath. "She didn't just conquer me, but my entire family who already loves her very much." He took a deep breath and continued. "Sir, I came here today to officially ask for your blessing to marry Grace. I know we are already engaged. She accepted my proposal, and maybe it didn't seem so traditional, but tradition matters. Family matters, and I want to do this the right way." David studied him for a long moment. Then slowly, his face softened. "She is happy. Happier than I've ever seen. And Margaret shows me those photos from the gala every week. The way you look at our girl." He extended his hand. "Welcome to the family, son. Take care of my treasure." Andrew shook his hand, relieved and moved. "With my life, sir. With my life." When they returned to the house, Grace was on the porch with her mother, clearly anxious. Seeing the two men smiling, she let out the breath she was holding. David opened his arms and she ran into his embrace. "He is a good man, Gracie," David whispered against her hair. "And he loves you the right way." That night at dinner with the whole family, Sarah and her husband, the nephews, even close uncles who happened to be passing by, Andrew officially proposed to Grace, kneeling in the Holloway's living room while the whole family watched, even though she was already engaged. Because tradition mattered, because family mattered. And when Grace cried with happiness again, saying yes one more time, the whole Holloway family knew that she had found her match. The rest of spring and summer passed in preparations. Grace wanted something simple but meaningful. Andrew Bellamy insisted on helping, and the two women, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, spent afternoons planning every detail, building a bond of their own. "Christmas," Grace said definitively during one of those planning afternoons. "I want to get married on Christmas." "Christmas Eve," Catherine suggested, her eyes shining. "As a gift. For both of you." "Perfect." A small church in Connecticut where Grace had grown up. Elegant but not excessive Christmas decorations. Few guests, closest family and friends. A reception at the Holloway's house that had surprising space when decorated properly. Elena as maid of honor, naturally. John as best man. John's daughters as flower girls. Grace's nephews carrying the rings. Two worlds uniting in a celebration of love that had started with a lie and become the purest truth. One afternoon, Grace went to the Harmony Foundation office for the first time in weeks, closing a cycle of years of dedication. A box of carefully addressed wedding invitations in her hands. Elena had insisted they deliver them personally to the closest colleagues. "It's more special," she had said, "and you need to see their faces when they see that you are really going to marry the Greek god." The reception was warm. Hugs, congratulations, requests to see the ring again. Grace was distributing the last invitations when Charles appeared in the hallway, a folder under his arm, his expression carefully neutral. "Grace," he greeted with a nod. "I heard the news. Congratulations." "Thank you, Charles." She extended a cream envelope with his name in elegant calligraphy. "You're invited if you'd like to go." He took the invitation, looked at the envelope for too long. "So it really is real," he muttered, more to himself than to her. I thought maybe that boyfriend was just A convenient lie, that eventually you would see that I was a better option. Before Grace could respond, Elena appeared like a hurricane of Latin energy, her eyes shining. Dangerously. A lie? Never. She placed her arm over Grace's shoulders, a smile that was pure mischief. My friend doesn't lie, Charles. She co-creates her reality with powerful affirmations. Pure manifestation, law of attraction. You should read up on it. Grace bit her lip, closing her eyes, holding back the laugh that threatened to explode. Charles looked between the two, clearly not fully understanding, but realizing that he was somehow being provoked. I understand, he said, slowly, although it was obvious that he didn't understand anything. Well, I wish you happiness. He walked away, a clear doubt planted behind his ear, trying to decipher what exactly Elena had meant. As soon as he turned the corner, Grace burst into silent laughter, burying her face in Elena's shoulder. Co-creating reality. Powerful affirmations. Elena. What? Elena was laughing too. Technically, it's true. You affirmed you had a boyfriend, or rather a protective wolf Adonis. With dark hair and eyes that melt people, the universe delivered Andrew Bellamy. Perfect manifestation, if you ask me. You are terrible. But I'm forced to agree. I'm brilliant. And now Charles will spend weeks trying to figure out if you're a witch, a self-help guru, or if he has completely lost his mind. Elena winked. Mission accomplished. Grace shook her head, still laughing, but grateful. That chapter was finally, definitively, closed. The morning of December 24th dawned, clear and cold. Snow had fallen during the night, covering Connecticut in perfect white. Grace woke up at her parents' house, surrounded by Elena, Sarah, and Margaret. The wedding dress was beautiful. White silk, classic cut, delicate lace on the sleeves. Her hair was pulled into a low bun with white flowers. A lace veil that had belonged to her grandmother, earrings designed by Andrew, another passionate treat. You are radiant, Margaret whispered, tears in her eyes. My girl. At the church, Andrew waited at the altar. Impeccable tuxedo, but it was the expression on his face that mattered. Pure, vulnerable love, mixed with a groom's nervousness. John beside him murmured, Breathe, man. She's going to show up. I know. I just need to see her. The music began. The doors opened, and there she was, Grace on her father's arm, smiling through happy tears, walking toward him as if he were the only person in the universe. Andrew felt his own tears threatening. She was perfect. Absolutely perfect. When David placed her hand in his, he whispered, She's yours now, but she will always be my girl. Always, Andrew promised, his voice choked. The ceremony was beautiful. The pastor spoke about love that reflects divine love, about commitment, about choosing each other every day, especially on the difficult ones. When it was time for the vows, Andrew held both her hands, his eyes fixed on hers. Grace, you came into my life like an unexpected storm and showed me that I was living in black and white. You brought color, purpose, home. You are my little dove, my favorite, my peaceful happiness, and my inspiration. And I promise to spend every day earning your love. Grace was crying now, but smiling through the tears. Andrew, you saw me when I was invisible and in a tragic moment of comical despair. He smiled at the memory, and her world lit up even more. You valued me when I felt small. You loved me when I didn't even know how to love myself. You are my wolf, my protector, my best friend. And I promise to be the place of peace and truth where you can run after hard days, today and always. Tears shone in both their eyes. The priest resumed his words and continued, By the power vested in me, I declare you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Andrew gently tilted Grace in his arms, for the kiss that sealed the promise of a lifetime. The guests were moved to happy tears. The reception transformed the Holloway house into a winter wonderland. White lights intertwined in branches, white and green flowers, tables decorated with candles and fresh pine. The first dance was to the sound of Ella Fitzgerald, Someone to Watch Over Me, and Andrew held Grace as if she were the world's most precious treasure. Happy, Mrs. Bellamy, he murmured against her hair. Immensely, Mr. Bellamy. Elena took the microphone for a toast, visibly emotional, her voice breaking. "I met Grace 5 years ago. In those 5 years, I've never seen her as happy as she is now. Andrew, you are a lucky man. Take care of her. And Grace," she raised her glass, "you deserve every bit of this happiness. To the newlyweds." John followed, more contained but equally sincere. "Andrew has been my best friend for 20 years. I've watched him build an empire. I've watched him succeed at everything he touched. But I never saw him truly happy until Grace. You saved him from an empty life, Grace. And for that, all our gratitude. To the newlyweds." The cake was cinnamon, a special request from Grace, her grandmother's recipe. As they cut it together, Andrew whispered, "Remember the first cookies you made? How could I forget? You almost cried. That's when I knew I was lost. Completely." The night progressed into a perfect celebration. Families mingled, laughter filled the air, love was tangible in every corner. Catherine and Margaret talking like old friends. Thomas and David discussing literature. Grace's nephews teaching John to dance. Two worlds, now one. Close to midnight, Andrew and Grace slipped away to the back porch. Snow began to fall again, large, lazy flakes dancing under the light of the full moon. He took off his jacket, placing it over her shoulders, pulling her close to the warmth of his body. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Bellamy." She snuggled against him, fitting perfectly as always. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Bellamy. Want to know a secret?" he asked, his voice soft in the silent night. "Always. Exactly 1 year ago, I was alone in my apartment, eating your cookies and wondering if you thought about me, wondering if I had messed everything up, if you were real or a dream I had invented." He turned her to face him, his eyes shining with emotion. "And now you are my wife, just mine, my happily ever after." "Andrew," she whispered, touching his face with cold but affectionate fingers, "you were always more than I dreamed of. Since that first coffee shop, since the first look, I just needed time to be brave enough to admit it." He kissed her forehead, then each closed eyelid, her cold nose, finally her lips. Soft, reverent, a promise of a lifetime ahead. "Shall we go home?" he murmured against her lips. "Yes," she replied, smiling. "Let's go to our home." They said goodbye to the family, long hugs and happy tears. Elena squeezed Grace with a force that almost hurt. "You did it, friend. Your Christmas fairy tale." "We did it," Grace corrected, "because you were with me every crazy step of this journey. And looking at where we are, I think God forgave us for our little lie." Elena burst out laughing. "Not a lie, friend, co-creation. Live the life you created with your imagination. And my loyal complicity, queen." They hugged for a long time and said their goodbyes. The limousine waited for them, discreetly but elegantly decorated with white flowers. Inside, chilled, champagne and red roses. As they drove through the snowy streets of Connecticut towards the boutique hotel where they would spend their first night as husband and wife before flying to their honeymoon in Tuscany, Grace snuggled against Andrew. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For finding me, for seeing me, for loving me exactly as I am." "Grace," he turned her face up, his eyes serious and shining with love. "The thank you is mine. You saved my life without even knowing it. You gave me purpose. You gave me fresh and simple inspiration." When they arrived at the hotel, a luxurious suite that Andrew had booked months ago, he carried her across the threshold in the traditional style, both laughing like teenagers in love. Inside, a fireplace crackled softly. White rose petals were scattered around, champagne in a silver ice bucket. A soft jazz playlist that Grace had put together played low. Andrew gently placed Grace on the floor, his hands on her waist, looking at her as if she were a miracle he couldn't quite believe. "My wife," he said, testing the words, savoring them. "I still can't quite believe it." "Believe it," she replied, rising on her tiptoes to kiss him, her fingers intertwining in his hair. The kiss began soft and full of meaning. Months of anticipation, a year of growing love, a lifetime of waiting for the right person, all merging in that perfect moment. When they finally separated, both breathing raggedly, faces high, flushed, Andrew leaned his forehead against hers. "I love you, Grace Bellamy, more than words can express. I love you, Andrew, Always. Forever. He took her hand, guiding her to the suite's private balcony. The snow continued to fall in a sacred silence, the city below illuminated with Christmas lights covered in perfect white. A year ago, Andrew began, pulling her into his arms, her back against his chest, both looking out at the snow. I was lost, rich but empty, successful, but deeply lonely. And then a woman with hot chocolate and the kindest eyes I'd ever seen walked into my life with a desperate lie about a fake boyfriend. Grace laughed softly against his chest, intertwining her fingers with his. And an impossible, handsome, and mysterious man offered to help, having no idea he was saving both of them. It wasn't a farce, was it? He asked softly, kissing the top of her head. It never really was. No, she admitted, turning in his arms to face him. From the very first moment, it was frighteningly real. I was just too terrified to admit it. They stood there for precious minutes, under the falling snow and witnessing stars, holding each other. Two different worlds, two unlikely people. A story that began with a lie and became the most beautiful truth. Come, Andrew finally whispered, taking her hand, his eyes darkening with promise. Let's go inside. We have a whole lifetime ahead of us, but tonight is just ours, my little dove. I promise to honor it with affection for the rest of my life, and without rush, to devote all my love to you. Grace let him guide her back inside, where the fireplace warmed and the future awaited. She looked back one last time, seeing the snow cover the world in perfect silence, and smiled. Her journey had begun with fear and despair, a lie to escape an uncomfortable situation with a man who didn't understand, no, but it had transformed into something extraordinary. Love, real, deep, and lasting. The kind poets write about and artists dream of. And when Andrew closed the balcony door, when he pulled her into a kiss that promised an entire night of discovery, when she laughed against his lips and whispered, "Finally, my wolf," when the night unfolded in intimacy and whispers and promises exchanged in the warm darkness only illuminated by the fireplace, Grace knew with absolute certainty and complete peace she had found the happiness she never thought was possible. Not in a place, but in a person. Her wolf, her protector, her love, her husband. And he had found his dove, his delicate and genuine peace, his inspiration, his wife. Together, they were complete. The snow continued to fall outside during the night, covering Connecticut in a silent and sacred blanket. And inside the warm suite, two hearts beat as one, two souls intertwined forever, two worlds united in a love that defied logic, but made perfect sense. When dawn arrived, painting the sky pink and gold, Andrew and Grace woke up intertwined, the first rays of sun illuminating faces in absolute peace. "Good morning, my wife," he murmured, kissing her forehead. "Merry Christmas." "Good morning, my husband," she replied, smiling against his chest. The happiest Christmas of all, and the first day of the rest of their lives began, together, as it would always be. 5 years later, the Bellamy house in the Hamptons was transformed into organized and noisy chaos, the best kind of chaos. 5 years of marriage had brought unexpected and wonderful changes, the biggest of which was running in circles through the living room at that very moment. "Matthew Thomas Bellamy, don't run with cookies in your hand," Grace called from the armchair near the fireplace, a worn copy of Sense and Sensibility open on her lap. The 3-year-old boy stopped halfway, dark curls identical to his father's bouncing dark brown eyes wide, with calculated innocence. "But Mommy, I was taking them to Grandma Margaret." "Liar," his twin sister Lily Catherine declared from the table where she was drawing with colored pencils. She had the same dark, wavy hair as her father, but light green eyes like her mother's shone with a wisdom beyond her 3 years. "You were going to eat all of them." "No, I wasn't." "Yes, you were." Andrew emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of hot chocolate, laughing at the scene. "Okay, you too. Christmas truce, remember?" He placed the tray on the table, then knelt down to Matthew's height. "And son, if you're going to lie, at least do it with conviction. That innocent look won't work on me. I'm an expert at it." Grace rolled her eyes, closing the book. "Don't teach our son to lie better." "I'm teaching strategy," Andrew defended himself, winking at her. "Daddy," Matthew tugged on his sweater sleeve, serious. Teach me that look? Andrew raised an eyebrow. Which look? The one you gave when you met Mommy. The one that melts people. Grandma Catherine said it's your superpower. The room erupted in laughter. Elena, who was helping Catherine in the kitchen, appeared in the doorway. Ay Dios mío. The child is 3 years old and he already understands the dynamics of this marriage. Grace was red, laughing and hiding her face in her hands. Andrew, completely unashamed, picked Matthew up. All right, son. Lesson number 1 of the protective Bellamy look. He positioned himself in front of Grace, Matthew watching intently. First, you focus on the most important person in your life. He fixed his eyes on Grace, and even after 5 years, she felt her stomach flip. Then, Andrew continued, his voice getting softer. You let her see exactly how much she means, no words, just truth. His gaze intensified, that combination of deep love and fierce protection that had made Grace fall in love years ago. And finally, he whispered still, looking at Grace, you make it clear that nothing and no one will hurt her while you're breathing. Then you look around with the ferocity of a protective wolf and melt all the men who are looking at her. An explosion of laughter echoed for a full minute. Then Noah, Grace's nephew, now 11 years old, broke the moment. Uncle Andrew, that was too intense. And very effective, Sarah added, fanning her face dramatically. Grace, how do you survive that daily? With difficulty, Grace admitted, still caught in her husband's gaze. Matthew frowned, looking between his parents. I can do that. He turned to his sister, trying to copy his father's serious and intense expression. Lily looked at him, paused her drawing, and then burst out laughing. You look like you have a tummy ache. I do not. Yes, you do. You look like Teddy when he eats too much. Teddy, the golden retriever they had adopted 2 years ago, lifted his head at the sound of his name, his tail thumping on the floor. The room exploded in laughter again. Andrew kissed Matthew's forehead. You'll need practice, son. It took me 38 years to perfect. And a Grace Holloway to have a reason to use it, John added from the armchair. His own daughters, now teenagers, rolling their eyes at their father's comment. Margaret appeared from the kitchen, taking off her apron. Dinner is ready. Everyone to the table. The table was stunning. White tablecloth, lit candles, elegant but warm Christmas decor. A golden turkey as the centerpiece, surrounded by dishes representing both families. Margaret's scalloped potatoes, Catherine's roasted vegetables, the cinnamon pie Grace had made with her grandmother's recipe, and special cookies that Andrew had surprisingly learned to make. 2 families, now completely intertwined, settled around the table. Matthew insisted on sitting between his parents. Lily chose a spot between her grandmothers, clearly a favorite of both. When everyone was seated, David, the Holloway family patriarch, cleared his throat. Before we eat, let's give thanks. Hands intertwined around the table. Matthew held Andrew's tightly. Lily squeezed Grace's. Heavenly Father, David began, his voice firm but emotional. Thank you for this abundant table, for this united family, for another Christmas together. Thank you for health, Margaret added softly. For the love that grows every year, Catherine continued. Thomas looked at Andrew and Grace. For Andrew and Grace's 5 years of marriage, for the example of love they are. Grace felt tears well up. Andrew squeezed her hand. And then, surprising everyone, Andrew spoke. Thank you for reminding us. His voice was low but clear, that even when we didn't realize it, even when I didn't believe, there was a God watching over us, preparing the way, bringing 2 unlikely people together at the impossible time. He looked at Grace, his eyes shining. Thank you for giving me not only a wife and family, but faith, true faith. Grace was openly crying now. The 5 years of marriage had transformed Andrew from a pragmatic agnostic into a man of quiet but deep faith. He wasn't religious in the traditional sense, but he had found God in the way Grace lived, in daily acts of kindness, in unconditional love, in unwavering hope. And thank you, Elena added, her voice breaking, for proving that Christmas fairy tales are real. They just need to start with a well-intentioned lie and a Greek god offering help. The table erupted in laughter and amens. Amen, Matthew repeated enthusiastically. Amen, Lily echoed more softly. Amen, everyone concluded together. As they began to serve dinner, Matthew tugged on Andrew's sleeve again. Daddy, when I grow up, will I have a protective look like yours? Andrew smiled, messing up his son's curls. If you love someone the right way, son, it will be natural. I promise. Like you. Love mommy? Exactly like I love mommy. Matthew thought for a moment, then nodded seriously, as if he had received profound wisdom. Grace watched her husband and son, her heart so full it ached in a good way. She looked around the table, two families that were now one, children who were the future, love that had grown from a lie into the most solid truth. 5 years ago, she had invented a fake boyfriend in a panic. Today, she had a real husband, two miraculous children, an expanded family, and a renewed faith in divine providence. Lily appeared beside her, climbing onto her lap with the ease of someone who did it 1,000 times a day. Mommy, are you crying? Happy tears, my love. Why? Grace kissed her daughter's dark curls. Because we are very, very blessed. Because of God. Because of God, Grace confirmed, looking at Andrew, who was watching the two of them with that look that still melted her. And because of love. And cinnamon cookies? Matthew added hopefully. And cinnamon cookies, Andrew agreed, laughing. And there, surrounded by love and laughter and the smell of cinnamon and pine, 5 years after a wedding that began with a Christmas lie, the Bellamy family celebrated not only the date, but the unlikely journey that had brought them there. And together they had built a legacy of love that would continue for generations. Outside, the snow began to fall softly. Inside, hearts were warmed by something greater than themselves. Gratitude, faith, family, and love. Always love. And so the lie that began on a cold December in Manhattan transformed into the most beautiful truth of all. That love sometimes finds us when we're not looking. That delicacy is not weakness. It is silent strength. And that being seen, truly seen, changes everything. The wolf found his dove. The dove found her protector. And together they found purpose. Because happily ever after is not by chance. It is a choice. It is a daily commitment. It is love lived, not just promised. Grace and Andrew chose each other. Today, tomorrow, always. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If this story touched your heart, leave your like and share it with those who love Christmas romances. If you are not yet subscribed, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next love stories that are coming. Comment Merry Christmas and say the city you are watching from. May God bless you and your family. And one last piece of advice, be careful with little lies, especially those about perfect boyfriends. You might end up bumping into him at the corner coffee shop. A hug with the scent of cinnamon cookies. I'll see you in the next video.